remote watching us on TV. This is the first town council meeting of 2025. So I'm going to call it to order January 13th, 2025 at 7:01 p.m. Lacking a gavel tonight for some reason, I will knock. So we're in business. Call to order. Item 1 in call to order is that we have 6 councilors physically in attendance. Councilor Dombrowski will be absent this evening. If everyone would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. As I mentioned, we have 6 councilors. Item 4 is public engagement. I think most folks know the rules on public engagement. It's a 3-minute limit. If you're going to speak, whether you be here or remote, state your name and address. You have 3 minutes to present your views. These are not back and forth with the council, so we just hear you out for 3 minutes and then move on to the next person. Should we, town administrator, perhaps start with people here present?
I think I'd start, we normally start in the way people came in.
Oh, okay.
So,
who's first?
I think Dale Findley was first. I think he'll be online.
Sherry, do we have Mr. Finley online?
Yes, we do have Dale. He is coming right over.
Wonderful.
Okay, I'm sorry. Took me a while to get used to. Never mind.
No problem.
Thank you for letting me speak. Real quick, my issue is that the signage that was turned down in September at the intersection of Walton and Salem Street, I had requested because of traffic which keeps coming down that street whenever there's a backup on 128, either north or south, or as it is nowadays, both ways. People try and do a cut through from using Walton, hoping to get to either Montrose, or coming from the other direction, hoping to get to Walnut Street. So we've seen an increase in this. 10 years ago, it wasn't a problem, but there's so much more traffic now. I see people constantly coming around and turning around in the cul-de-sac in front of my house, and they're not residents of the Walton area or Renee Drive that I live on. So I request that you relook at that. I think it's item 6 on your agenda today, for the signage at the end of Walton. That's all I have, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Finley.
Next on the John Chrisley, who is here.
Good evening, members of the council. I'm John Chrisley. I live at 19 Humphrey Street. Tonight I want to make comments on the North Ave redesign project that, as you know, has been under discussion for probably 3 years now. My first comment is I want to say that I think the design as proposed and as is largely built is a win-win for the town of Wakefield. There's sort of 3 main components to the redesign. The main travel lanes on the road have been striped at what's called a standard guidance width of 11.5 feet. When the lanes were first striped, I walked down to North Ave and I could notice that it seemed like the car traffic was calming a little bit, seemed to operating a little bit slower. The other major components of the redesign, as you know, have been a northbound bike lane going north on North Ave, and also a buffer lane, and the addition of the much discussed plastic flex posts sitting in the middle of the buffer lane. My main point is all of these design changes have been vetted and reviewed by Mass DOT transportation people and engineers for at least a decade. They're the same design changes you can see on hundreds of miles of roadway across Massachusetts. And these types of design improvements for pedestrians, bikes, and cars are becoming just more common. The second point I'd like to address tonight is the first 2 weeks of December, which appeared to be a 2-week rollout of the flex posts on North Ave. In talking to people around town, I would say that this appeared to be a bit of a botched rollout of the design on North Ave. We heard criticism that people didn't know how to drive around the flex posts on North Ave, and that there were conflicts with people knowing where to park for the farmers market with the design changes. In my attendance at previous council meetings, it was my understanding that there would be a full season rollout for the North Ave redesign from the spring, the summer, and the fall. It just seems to make common sense that when you're rolling out a project of this magnitude in the town, you have to communicate to all of the parties involved, and giving it a full 3-season rollout phase seems to, as I said, make common sense. The last thing I'd like to mention is that my 26-year-old nephew moved into Wakefield just prior to the holidays. He's living at one of the apartments on 600 North Ave. And over Christmas celebration, he said to me, "Hey, what's going on with North Ave?" He goes, "I really like the pedestrian crossings. My wife likes it. But they pulled out the bike lane posts like 2 weeks later." He goes, "It's kind of crazy to put them up and then take them right back down 2 weeks ago." So I think when newcomers to Wakefield see these rollouts happening and they appear to be haphazard and poorly managed, I think it makes the town look ineffectual to different populations in the community. So I'd like to sum up by saying I'm calling on the town council this year, it's 2025 now, to do the full 3-season rollout, finish the design, put the flex posts up, and have an effective communications plan with all the stakeholders, people at large, the farmers market, and key user groups of the road. I think this is going to go a long way towards addressing misinformation that could be circulating by word of mouth or probably on social media. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Next up, Steve.
Next up on the list was Kathleen Toohey.
Is Kathleen present or online?
Online, I believe.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Kathleen.
Okay, great. My name's Kathleen Toohey. I live at 8 Wiley Place. I'd like to start out by saying I'm not here to speak in favor of or against the flex post or the bike lane on North Ave. What I'm here to speak about is the disastrous implementation of the changes that were made on North Ave. The decision to put flex posts up in December is a significant deviation from the plan previously agreed upon by this council and the DPW, which was to put them down in early fall or as soon as they came in and the road was ready, and then pick them up in mid-November prior to snow. Members of this council admitted at the December 16th meeting that they had pushed to get the posts down so people would see what they would be like. The lines for the bike lane were painted approximately December 5th and posts were installed on December 6th. Not a word was said to the residents of Wakefield. No email sent, no electronic sign warning people of a lane shift or a new bike lane. In the recent past, when traffic changes were made on Common Street and the new 4-way stop was put in at the Salem and Pleasant Streets intersection, emails were sent and signs went up. Even the speed tables on Farm Street got emails and signs that stayed up the entire time those were deployed. On top of a bike lane and flex posts added, those who pushed this through, I'm sorry, I lost my place here. On top of the bike lane and the flex post added, the old double yellow line was not effectively covered or removed when the new lines were painted. I did send a photo in earlier. I don't know if Sherry has the ability to put that up. I did take a photo on North Ave on December 29th that has very clearly 2 sets of double yellow lines. So with 2 different double yellow lines, how were people even supposed to know where to drive? This took another month to be remedied. The timing with the farmers market on December 14th, along with a complete lack of notification to residents and market shoppers proves that this was a plan designed to fail. With no knowledge of these changes, how did you expect people to react? Surprise is the obvious reaction, with understandable anger to follow. This was the expected response from those who pushed this through. Planning for public outcry and governing via Facebook posts and other social media is a great disservice to the people of Wakefield, and we all deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Vincent in the crowd, or is Vincent online?
Vincent is online, however, he did not wish to
Well,
speak.
he did raise his hand, so I'm
Oh, he
bringing
did,
him
okay.
over.
I guess he wants to speak, yep.
Are we bringing Vincent over, Sherry, do you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Vincent, you're muted. Vincent, can you unmute? Steve, if you want to read what he sent in, I don't know if
Sure.
he's having trouble.
Sure. This came in today, and it indicated that he did not want to speak. It is in the package. Town Council, as I mentioned in a prior admission to the council, the design of the bike path is not friendly to cyclists or motorists. Additionally, the traffic lanes are too narrow. The traffic lane heading south on North Ave is now also too narrow after the redesign and is dangerous for cyclists. Finally, an extra set of double lines were not removed, potentially leading to a head-on collision. That's it.
Sherry, does it appear that Vincent is,
He says he's unable to
Okay.
unmute. Yeah.
well, if he didn't hear, tell him the town administrator has read his comments. Any other public participation tonight, Sherry?
No, that's all for tonight.
Okay. The only comment I'll make is relative to the WO lines. I did email, and that has been, I think, remediated, at present anyway. It did take a while. Moving on, and this segues right into item 5A, the North Ave Flex Post discussion. At our prior meeting, there was a request from Councilor Butt to bring in the police chief and the fire chief, so I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Butt to start.
Hi, Chief and Chief. I don't know if you saw our last month meeting. Welcome, Happy New Year. So there was a lot of there are a lot of comments made about the bike lane and potential. As I was just rereading the public comment that we had, so potential accidents. So I thought we'd have the experts instead of all of us pretending that we were chiefs, of you guys explaining in that short time what you saw using your expertise, and then also when they go back, you know, when more people are biking in the spring, what would you like us to look out for, or what will you be looking out for?
Do you want to start? Well, I wouldn't call myself an expert on bicycle lanes, first off. So when we were here in December of 2023, I referred to the MAPC bike plan, and the first time I read it, I thought it was an ironclad plan. And then I realized that it was a concept, and a concept only. And within this plan, there's ideas, right? And Mr. Renault came up here and he talked about all the different ideas that would be implemented throughout town. And the beauty of it being a concept is it could be changed. If we didn't like it, we could alter it. And we also talked about the lane widths on North Ave. And I said at that time that I was skeptical of an 11-foot wide travel lane. But engineers said it's okay, and we said we'd look at it and see what it looks like when it gets implemented.
So it got implemented, and I'll be honest with you, I am still skeptical of an 11-foot wide travel lane. I think they're too narrow. And I looked at the roadway with the flex posts and the bike lane. And today I went out and I studied it again without the flex posts. But to backtrack a little bit, I went to Melrose the other day and I looked at their bike lanes, how they have them set up. They have a travel lane, they have about a 4-foot wide bicycle lane, and then on the inside of the bicycle lane, they have parking. There's no flex posts, there's no buffer zone. So I talked to the police chief in Melrose and I said, have you had any problems with your bicycle lanes? And he said, no. But what I like about their plan is they've maximized their use of the roadway. So when I went out and looked at North Ave today, I see these two 11-foot wide travel lanes. I see a 2 to 3 foot buffer zone and then a 5-foot bicycle lane. Now, I'm not saying we should get rid of the bicycle lane, it's there. I think we should shrink it down. This is my opinion. Shrink it down, eliminate the buffer zone, and then widen back out the travel lanes. Because listening to some comments from your last town council meeting, there's some concern about delivery trucks stopping the roadway, postal trucks, large tractor trailer trucks that utilize North Ave, and there's some valid points to that. I think we need to utilize the roadway as much as we can, and looking at it now, I think we've taken too much of the travel lane away from the vehicular traffic, and that's my opinion.
I would agree with Chief Scory's comments. When this plan was first presented to me, I believe I stated that I had very little experience with the poles in question that were put up on North Ave. They're not present anywhere else in town except at railroad crossings. That makes perfect sense to me. And that I would really not have much of an opinion until I saw them up. Now that I have seen them up, I would agree with Chief Scory that the travel lanes are too narrow. There's no place for any trucking at all to, especially trucking that would have to stop, like FedEx or UPS or any one of a number of other, even just delivering the mail. If a vehicle has to stop in one of those lanes, there is no way for a car to get around them except to go into the other lane. There's no room for anybody to get out of our way if we're responding to an emergency. I'm also not against the bike lane. I just question the need for the poles. Those poles are not going to keep someone from getting hit if somebody's not paying attention and crosses into the bike lane. So I would, I understand the board's going to make its own decision in the spring, but I'm not in favor of the poles.
So I read the part of it, not the whole thing, but the study by the National Traffic Transportation Commission on flex poles. And it says that it makes bike lanes safer for bicyclists. But it doesn't talk about what it does for motorists, and that's my concern. So when I drove down North Ave while the flex poles were there, I honestly considered it a major distraction. Now, I've had my license for many years. I'm not going to tell you how many, but when I got my license, driving was much easier, right, when I was a kid. There wasn't as much traffic, there weren't as many distractions. And what I thought about driving down North Ave is if I'm a new driver and I'm driving down North Ave, there is nothing around me but distractions, traffic, the flex poles. I was so focused on the flex poles, I had to like redirect my attention to traffic. And I'm not saying eliminate the bike lane, but I think that we can do North Ave with, say, a 4-foot bike lane, widen out the travel lanes, and maybe even if you widen out the travel lanes, you can put sharrows on the northbound side so that bikers can utilize the northbound side, and now you don't have just a one-way bike side to North Ave. I say we utilize the road more, get more out of it than what we're doing right now.
Did we have any accidents? I get the distraction. Did you hear about any accidents those weeks that the?
No.
Okay. And did we have any calls for the fire truck where it would have been a problem?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay. And I see Bill Renault here, so maybe later we can talk about the design. But thank you. I don't know. I can't remember. We've had this conversation so many times, so I can't remember why we didn't do the Melrose design here. So hopefully we can talk about that later. But
Counselor Carney?
Yeah, I want to thank the chiefs. I think I agree with you 100%. I ride that road with my bike, and I feel a lot more comfortable if the roads were wider and had a freer flow of traffic. What I was, and I talked to Lieutenant Sullivan about this, what I'm concerned about when we start doing, controlling traffic on a main thoroughfare, and to me, North Ave was always a main thoroughfare, one of the entranceways to Wakefield, okay? That when you slow traffic down there, you're going to add traffic to Main Street and Lowell Street. Now, Lowell Street, in the wisdom of the town, within the last 2 years, has put a 24-hour diesel gas station there that I wrote and opposed, okay? It's the only diesel station from North Avenue to Route 1. And everyone who lives in that corridor knows anytime something happens on 128, that road gets backed up. And so there's no cure to that because people are using Waze, and the commuters, they know how to get around things. I just looked today, and I remember in that discussion with the Board of Appeals that they weren't going to allow signs on Route 12895 to say diesel at this location. Well, I looked up, and I always use a price tracker to look for my fuel. And you look on Price Tracker, and it says diesel there. So, I mean, people aren't using signs anymore. They look on an app, and they know where diesels are. I've been there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I've seen trucks coming in. It's going to grow and grow and grow. We're going to have people 24 hours a day using that diesel gas station, and what that's doing to the neighborhood. Speaking about the parking at the farmers market, which is going to get totally destroyed by this. And by the way, there's only one no parking sign from Veterans Field all the way to 128. One no parking sign. So you brought to my attention there was no parking on that street, and you're right. I understand that that's the rule, but there are no signs. So that's why people at the farmers market, park on the curb and they take advantage of it. Okay, so we're affecting a lot more here than just bicyclists and people who want to use it and create things. And secondly, if the final plan was to have Main Street done as well, I'm sure you're going to look at Church Street. What good is it to have a bike path only going 1/4 away around the lake? And to whose advantage is that? So on my behalf, Chiefs, I appreciate your comments and I agree with you 100%.
Councilor Chang?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief Sullivan and Chief Scory, for being here today and for your observations. I had a couple of questions. First of all, appreciate Councilor Butt asking, my first question, which was, to what extent have we seen any accidents or, delays in emergency responses in the 2 weeks that the flex posts were up? And it sounds like the answer is to no extent. And I recognize that's a short period, which is, I think, part of the reason why we wanted to do a longer test, but appreciate that. I was wondering if you could opine on the distance placement of the flex poles. So I think one of the things that surprised certainly me, other than the posts going up when they did, was the fact that they were sort of closer together than I had anticipated. I think the original vision was something like 40 feet apart. And so could you comment a little bit about, what you would see, when we do place the flex posts, again in the spring to do a longer test? What would you see as sort of the optimal kind of distance in terms of placement for them, just to balance out, traffic issues, bike safety, pedestrian safety, and so forth?
I would guess that they were installed at 40 feet. It's just
Maybe they just looked a lot closer than
30 miles per hour. They look like they're right on top of each other. I don't know if there's an industry standard that's required.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. One other question, and then just an observation. I would like to see if we could kind of get some longitudinal data on traffic speeds on the street, because I think, again, as someone who walks and runs that road, it did feel like traffic was slowing down, which I actually do think is a good thing. And, when we talk about kind of the Waze impact, I think one of the things that makes it less likely that people will cut through Wakefield is if average traffic speeds are lower, and this becomes a less attractive alternative to 128. I would ask, going forward, I know we've kind of looked at technology for measuring traffic speeds, if we could make this whether it's using the trailer or using that technology, make this a priority in terms of just understanding what we're seeing over time in terms of traffic speeds on North Ave as we look at flex posts versus not. And then finally, just an observation, and this is one thing that I want to make sure that we also consider in the discussion. Again, and this is speaking as a pedestrian, as a runner, one of the things that I did find as sort of an added benefit to having the flex posts up was I felt that it made it easier to cross North Ave. The reason being that you had this sort of protected space, and obviously we've done a great job with the flashing beacons and everything, and I will say drivers are more likely to stop now than they were beforehand. But to me, you know, when you're on foot, it did feel safer crossing North Ave when you had kind of a narrower distance to cross. And so just as we think about, as a council, as we think about where we go in the future and as we evaluate, you know, kind of the future longer term pilot, I would just ask that we keep that into account as well. Thank you.
Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chairman Plain. Chief, thanks for meeting with me last week in your office. I appreciate you guys giving me an hour of your time. As I told you then, your subject matter expert opinion is important for my evaluation of public safety issues. I previously voted to retain the parking on the Main Street side of Lake Q based in large measure upon your collective recommendations. And last June, I did vote to temporarily install the flex posts on North Avenue based upon your recommendations to try them out. But as I explained to you in your office last week, my opinion regarding the future use of flex posts on North Avenue has evolved. And I just want to share for the council what the three of us briefly discussed in your office the other day. The North Avenue shared use path bike lane right now runs 0.6 of a mile northbound on North Avenue. It's part of the Mystic Highlands Greenway, which would allow travel to continue north into Reading underneath the I-95 overpass, or to head east around the top of the lake, and then you would come southbound on Main Street back into Wakefield, northbound on North Avenue, then east along to the Quantipotic Parkway, and then south back into Wakefield. Since our June 24 vote to install the flex posts, I have reviewed the status of the other components of the Mystic Highlands Greenway and the Lake Q portions of the share use paths that would connect to the northbound travel on North Avenue. And here are the four very briefly. The I-95 overpass. Wakefield and Reading are still waiting for a response from Massachusetts Department of Transportation regarding the possibility of a shared use path underneath the overpass. We've been waiting for that for well over 2.5 years now. It appears that that's not going to be resolved anytime soon, because even if MassDOT gave us permission, then the two municipalities would have to get together and come up with a design and concept to implement that to allow that travel to go underneath the I-95 overpass. I then looked at Reading's Walker's Brook Drive redesign project. North Avenue becomes Walker Brooks once you get underneath the I-95 overpass. That is still in an evaluation stage. In late October of this year, Reading received a grant to insist their move from conceptual designs to a 50 to 75% design level and to start obtain necessary permitting requirements. Only after all those are satisfied is Reading going to try to seek additional funding for full construction stage. That also appears to not be completed anytime soon. Now I come back to Wakefield real quick. You get to the top of North Avenue and you want to go east. Quantipotic Parkway, that's part of the new housing construction. That is probably going to be finished in the foreseeable future. But then I look at the Main Street side of Lake Q, the southbound travel around Lake Q. That's listed on the Wakefield Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan as a high priority, but also a high cost. And there's no funding for that. The reason North Avenue was able to get done was because we have a grant, but we have no funding for the Main Street side, which means that's not going to be constructed anytime soon. So what I said in the office when I met with both of you is, in my opinion, since the other connections, both north into Reading and east and south back into downtown Wakefield, will not be completed anytime soon, the timing is not right to reinstall the flex posts on North Avenue. Moreover, Wakefield shouldn't even evaluate whether to reinstall the flex posts unless and until at least one, if not both, of the connecting paths, the Mystic Highlands Greenway and/or the Lake Q Loop, are completed. Does that, in your opinion, accurately describe the discussion and conclusion that we had in your office last week?
Yes.
That was the discussion, yes.
So I'm comforted that if I have an opportunity to vote to whether to reinstall the flex posts or not this spring, I'm going to follow your recommended advice and vote not to reinstall them. But thank you very much again for your time, both tonight and last week in your office. That's all I have, Chair McLean.
Any other counselors? Chief Scory, how many vehicles use North Ave daily average?
13,000.
13,000. Chief Sullivan, would you agree with the assessment, in your opinion, that, would you agree that the, what Chief Scory described as widening the lanes a bit and having a Cheryl, that would be the preferable way to go with this?
Yes, I think that would help, yes.
Okay. A couple of comments. Just, this council did vote to put up the polls and, get this up so that the public could view it in the fall. Took longer than I think it should have. We had the polls on October 22nd. Contractor reasons, we didn't get them up as fast. We had a 6-0 vote, I think. Councilor Gines was abstaining, leaving it to the DPW. But the vast majority of this council said, let's put them up so people can see them. So there was no real, there wasn't any subterfuge going on there. It was something we were supposed to do, and we did it. I figured it was okay to do it before the snow flies because we, as long as we could paint the lanes, and I was told that we could. And granted, that double yellow line, as soon as I heard about that, I said, let's get out there, guys, and that is confusing. I heard about it from a lot of residents. And I don't conduct anything on anti-social media. I'm not even on. So I don't have anything to do with anything you guys see there, okay? So some of these comments that have been made, I feel like they're directed to those of us, 6 of us voted to put up those polls before in the fall so people could get a look at them. There may not have been any accidents, but everybody on this council knows, because the pictures were shared, that someone did in that short period of time, and I guess maybe you could blame it on, no sign warning that this thing's coming, but somebody on the farmer's market day did hit one of those and it bounced into the road, and we have pictures showing a truck going around it. I've also just made observations. I don't have a big horse in this race, but today as I went out to 128, there was a budget renter truck, huge budget renter truck, in the southbound lane with flashers on. I don't know how long it was there. I don't know how long it was going to stay there. But just like the mail truck, which moves on and stops, everybody has to go by it. And when they go by it, they must cross the double yellow line. And then the people proceeding north in a northbound fashion are sitting there clearly wondering to themselves, what do I do? I can see this line over here. I'm not supposed to cross into there. So either they sit there and they wait, or if somebody gets impatient and they come out, I'm afraid that is a safety issue as well. And I think this is what the chiefs are saying. So, I don't think we were trying to put one over on anybody. I think we were trying to let the town, as we had voted, see, experience this. And then we got the feedback, and we got a lot of feedback. And I realize the feedback is positive and negative, but I think some of us think that it was primarily negative. I very much appreciate you taking your time to come in today. And I thank you for your frank comments now that you have actually seen this in place. Councilor Butler?
Sure. I don't have a big dog, as Mike said, in the bike lane front. The less we talk about bike lanes, frankly, at this council level, for this councilor anyway, the better. But I do think, let's not paint a fantasy picture of if we reduce the scope of the buffer area between the bike lanes. That budget rent-a-car, you'd still have to go around it into the other lane. Like we're not creating a miracle new lane here if we get rid of the buffer area and the flex poles. And I think the other thing that I think, in terms of a town and in terms of testing things and trying things out, is it's very disingenuous to put up the poles and the buffer lane and the bike lane and measure its effectiveness in December. Nobody's biking it. And granted, I don't know how many people are going to bike it to begin with. But I think the way we test this out is we see how it works in the spring. Like the whole time. We meant to test it in the fall to see like how much use it was getting, how much everything else. Yes, is it slowing down traffic? Probably a little. Is it? Yes, I understand where you're saying in terms of the potential safety hazards, but I don't think that the increase of a foot on either way might make a much greater difference to someone comfort-wise driving. And I get it, Chief Scory, but there is also some merit to having to pay attention and having to, like, not be able to fly down that road at, I know it's listed as 30. I don't, gladly, they don't have the tracker yet on my thing to say what I probably normally did getting home from Chipotle. But, yeah, I think, look, if it comes up for a vote, again, I would probably vote to, like, let's implement it as we had initially planned. Let's actually run the test like we had thought, instead of, especially because there's been a lot of hyperbole around, what's happened. And, like, yes, is some idiot going to run into the flex poles? Yeah. Like, that's going to happen, my guess is, every month and a half. Maybe even more than that, probably every couple of weeks. Who are we kidding? But that's why we bought extras. That's why we did a cheap solution versus an expensive one. Plus, didn't we regrade the road and whatnot? Let's not poo-poo how like cheap it's going to be to switch it back to, like, extending those lanes. Like, everybody's all up in arms when we spend, like, a few $100s on something. I think, the town engineer can tell us, or DPW can tell us how much it'll cost to unwind the flex pole discussion. But we did just drop, what, 50, 60 grand on the poles? Less than that? Yeah, high 30s, low 40s. Let's not give it 2 weeks in December. Let's give it a couple of months in the spring. Is just my take. And I know there wasn't a question in there.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Vincent?
Thank you, Chair McLean. I just want to clarify that the agenda item tonight was to deal with the flex posts, and that was my analysis, was on the flex posts. I know this conversation's evolved also into the buffer and the bike lane and the width of them. I'm not opining on that at all tonight. My evolved opinion is limited to the flex posts, as I indicated in my discussion. So even though this overall discussion has gone beyond what's in the agenda item, what I said tonight is solely dealing with the flex posts, because I honestly haven't analyzed to my extent, to my satisfaction, what my beliefs would be about the buffer zone and the bike lane. I'm limiting my discussion just to the flex posts. Just wanted to make sure that was clear on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Vincent. Anybody else before I let the chiefs go? Any reason any councilors need them in the room in case the town engineer has asked any questions? I think we should let them go.
Yes.
Yes, okay, I have a yes on my left. I don't have any no's. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
And thanks for your time and thanks for your analysis.
Have a good night.
You too. Yeah, I guess I didn't know we were entertaining you tonight as well, but would the councilors have questions for Mr. Renault tonight as well on this? It sounded like that was a possibility. Or Mr. Conley.
You get both guns tonight, I guess.
Okay.
Fire away.
Fire away.
I didn't have any questions for you too.
Terrific.
Even better.
Gentlemen,
Sounds good. We can keep it
ladies and
quick then.
gentlemen, anybody?
Great.
This is probably your easiest and shortest appearance ever in front of this council.
It's terrific. I am on for the next agenda item, though, so
Oh,
we may
okay.
just stick around.
All righty. Well, please stick around then. Councilor Vincent.
Chair McLean, thank you very much. The next agenda item deals with Flanders Lane. I'm an interested party to this. I think in the best interest of the council, I should recuse myself and leave the room. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Why then don't we move on to, when Councilor Vincent exits, move on to item 5B, roadway betterments, with a vote anticipated. Gentlemen.
Sure. So in your packet, folks, you received 2 memos for 2 betterments that we completed on Flanders Lane and Walton Lane. Both projects came in under budget. Flanders Lane coming in about $6,000 under budget, and Walton about $30,000 under budget. So well within what was approved at town meeting, approved by the council, and approved by our advisory board of public works. So we're requesting your approval to move forward with the final order a betterment, which will then start the payment through the tax roll.
And just so people understand, these were betterments that were sought by the people.
Yep, so there's a
on the
process,
streets.
yep, so these are both, they were both private ways. Flanders ended up actually being accepted as the remaining section as a town road as well, so going forward, that'll be town-owned, but any person that lives on a private road, we have a betterment process for repaving and repairing your street. We also do it for drainage, any type of improvements, so 50% of that street or neighborhood agrees that they would like to move forward with it. It goes through the Advisory Board of Public Works, eventually to you folks, gets placed on town meeting warrant for approval, gets all of those approvals before it moves forward. It gets town meeting approval, then we move forward and construct it.
Mr. Conway, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that, or?
No, I think Bill pretty much hit it. I mean, it's a public process, a bunch of steps to it, and we're here dotting some i's and crossing some t's.
Okey-doke. Councilors?
Yes,
Councilor Chance?
Mr. Chair, I have a move to approve the certification to assessors in order of betterments for both Flanders Lane and Walton Lane.
Do I have a second?
You want to take that separately so that,
You want to take, should we take them separately?
I think
Town
that
Council Vincent.
Council Vincent probably would like to vote.
Okay.
Good point, forgot about that.
Mr. Chair, I will amend my motion to make it specific to Flanders Lane.
Second.
And we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? All opposed? We got 5-0, Sherry, if you're keeping the record there. Can somebody invite Councilor Vincent back in?
I see him coming in, so while
There
he
he
is
comes.
coming in, Mr. Chair, I will move to approve the certification to assessors in order of betterment for Walton Lane.
Second.
And second, Councilor Carney. Any discussion on Walton Lane? Seeing none, all those in favor? None opposed. Sherry, that is 6-0 for the record.
Thank you.
And next is item 5C, Bylaw Review Committee. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. Bylaw Review Committee zoning recodification. And I believe that that is Mr. Lieber, who I think was here a minute ago.
You grab it? Yeah.
There he is, or he's coming. Good evening, Mr. Lieber. And I assume Mr. Bobrowski?
Good.
Could you state your name and address and perhaps launch into what we're doing tonight?
Certainly. Good evening, councilors. Thank you, Chair McLean. Dan Lieber, 1 Elm Street. Attorney Bobrowski is from out of town and assisting us as special counsel. So as chair of the Bylaw Review Committee, I've got many of the members of the committee who have joined us here in person. And it's a privilege to be able to talk with you this evening and to have Attorney Mullen here in the same room as Attorney Bobrowski, because both attorneys have been extraordinarily helpful to the committee as we've gone through a process of recodifying the bylaws themselves. So by way of background, and there is a very short presentation just to give a little bit of background, and then as there are questions that the councilors may have, please by all means, we invite lots of comment. This is a work in process. So a little bit about the actual, yep. So a little bit of background, let's go back one slide, there we go. It's initiated every 5 years by the town charter itself. And this particular bylaw review committee started in 2022. And what we are responsible for doing is reviewing all of the different bylaws in the town. And we are focusing on both general bylaws and recodifying zoning as well. So the zoning bylaws were recommended for recodification by the prior bylaw review committee, on which I was also a member, as was Councilor Vincent, as he's now town councilor, and that recommended that a future committee do that. The town meeting appropriated funds for this purpose in spring of 2022. And so as the town council appointed the bylaw review committee, originally of 10 members, and there are fewer than that currently serving. But as the committee has undergone its process, it has had the ability to collaborate with many different people in town departments, in addition to town boards. So we've worked with the planning board. We just came out of a meeting with zoning board of appeals. We've worked with many people who are professionals in various town departments, from the planning department to development to public works, public safety. The idea being that everyone who works with the town in some way, shape, or form interacts with the town bylaws, either in general bylaws or zoning. For zoning in particular, recodification hasn't been done in at least 40 years, if ever, since the Zoning Act was actually enabled many years ago last century, last millennium at this point. So many people, members of the public and people have contributed to what we have before us, which is a draft. And I'm mentioning that because feedback truly is welcome. The draft 7 that was circulated and is posted on the website is just that, it's a draft. It's probably 80% or so of the way there towards being ready for presentation at a town meeting, but it is by design open for feedback, and additional feedback is welcome and encouraged. So we're currently anticipating an article at the 2025 annual town meeting in May. That could get pushed back if there is a vote by the committee that they want to do it at another time, or if there seems to be a cause for delay. But currently, after about 3 years of work on getting the core recodification done, the idea is to present a recodified set of bylaws, and there will still be additional work that needs to be done as the legislature continues updating zoning. As other changes happen, there are additional things that will continue to impact zoning, but we will at least have a better starting place as opposed to the coddled together bylaws that we currently have. So as a part of the recodification itself, we reviewed the existing bylaws, which are Chapter 190, for those of you who look through E-code and look through the physical bylaws. Part of this was to check and verify the consistency with Mass General laws. Mass General laws are updated on a regular basis, and the bylaws do not get automatically updated. That requires a vote by town meeting, a process. Sometimes articles come forward, sometimes they don't. I know that your board has wrestled with various issues as the general laws have gotten updated and the town has not necessarily realized that they have to make process changes. That's something that all of the elected boards certainly have to wrestle with as well. So we've gone through that process, and again, as there's other pieces to this. Some of the highlights. We want to make this simpler to read and find information. If you're looking for something in the current bylaws, it's more difficult than it should be. If you're trying to find definitions, they're throughout the current bylaw. There are definitions inside of some of the various definitions of zones. You'll find definitions in signage. You'll find definitions in different places, and sometimes the definitions are conflicting in different sections. So really to change that and have a single set of definitions. There are no changes to maps. Really important. Maps are out of the scope of the bylaw review committee. That's something that is in the scope of the planning board, and we haven't really looked at maps at all for any changes. We're not trying to define the zones themselves. We are recommending that certain zoning references to zones that are not used be removed, because if there's a zone and there's nothing in the zone and there's no existing components of the zone other than a reference to it, that at that point it's antiquated. And so there are some changes there. And there are some other components as well. You'll notice of particular concern to many people is dimensional regulations. There are no changes to the dimensional regulations themselves. That's very important. There's no changes to density by the bylaw itself. Those changes are done by other groups, by other bylaws. The bylaw review is to take the existing bylaws, keep those elements, and really renumber things and make things more legible, more understandable. In addition, it allows for new and creative development. This is something that Attorney Bobrowski has been really helpful on in coming up with language to encourage new forms of businesses, new forms of development that can be creative in use, so that the land that we have and the businesses that we have and the buildings we have can be used in ways that is really positive for the town, and that the adjudicatory boards, including the Town Council, Board of Appeals, and Planning Board, have the ability to make decisions that benefit the town. When someone has a creative idea, the fact that it's new should not exclude it from consideration. That's really been a significant aspect. It allows for expanded services, such as senior housing in a way more than the current bylaw by definition currently does. So there's some things to handle, changes that are occurring to our demographics and to, well, everyone at these tables, because we're all getting older. At some point, we're likely to need some form of senior housing ourselves. So, and one really important aspect of this, it continues success across town boards. We had meetings with the planning board last month. We just came out of a meeting that was really very positive and successful with the Board of Appeals. We're now having a meeting with you. We will again be having additional meetings with other boards. And that's a core element to the success behind this group and to making this something that the town meeting will want to have recommendations for having it accepted and hopefully voting by an overwhelming majority to actually adopt as a replacement to the existing bylaws. So with that, if you've got any questions, Attorney Bobrowski is the preeminent expert. He literally wrote the books on zoning, and it's someone that was recommended by Attorney Mullen and has been fantastic of assistance, and he's able to get into the details of the bylaws in any sections and any questions that you may have.
Questions from the council? Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Lieber. I see Mr. Reed, Ms. Santos, Mr. Pride from the Bylaw Review Committee. Thank you for all the work that you've done on this. I mean, I think anyone who's spent any time in E-code knows that, I mean, this is really a large task to take on. And you guys have done a great job in taking that on. I have a couple of questions, just maybe to help me sort of understand a little bit about some of the thinking. And the first is, you've mentioned sort of the allowance for, some creative types of development. Is there an example or two that you can share, from the draft that highlights sort of the approach that you took? I mean, I've read through kind of version 7 online, but I was wondering if you could kind of distill out, what was an example or two of areas where you said, this is where we try to create some flexibility that doesn't exist today.
Attorney Bobrowski, if you'd like to take that.
Just a couple. Thank you for the question. One is that you have a creative use overlay district already. It doesn't seem to be something used. But in having that, you're right in line with your 128 compatriots. Burlington, Lexington have what they call planned residential or planned commercial or planned mixed use development. It specifically targets those things that are not in the bylaw. So if you've got a better idea than the bylaw, then bring it to us on an individual basis. We'll basically put it in front of the voters as a referendum. And as long as the parcel isn't minute, it will escape spot zoning challenges. Hartwell Avenue, I'm sure we all know it, on the Bedford side is all pretty much planned development districts in Lexington. And those of us who have visited Burlington Mall and the area around it know that that's been torn down and rebuilt several times. So that's one really good example of the kind of creativity that it's really hard to predict what the private sector can make a go at, especially with the world changing as fast as it does. Back in the old days, there was something called a plan unit development, but it was very prescriptive and it didn't work for anybody, for everybody. My favorite creative development is the intergenerational campus in Dedham on the top of a hill overlooking the Charles River. It's got the Rashi School, by Hebrew Senior Living was the sponsor, the Rashi School Assisted Living Long-Term Care Facility, and a child care center, and 90 acres of open space. Where in America was there something in a book that said intergenerational campus? Yeah, you can do it here. So they brought that idea to town meeting, and it was passed. On a simpler level, the signs and parking sections have a special permit provision, if it passes, that allow people to do something other than what the book requires. So if someone is required to put in 100 parking spaces, but in reality they can get by with 60, why have all that asphalt? Why not? You could ask for a variance in another town, but you're not going to reduce the size of the parking asphalt because you have soil condition, shape, or topography in 99 out of 100 cases. Why not just say it's better to do it this way than it is detrimental and get a special permit and go forward? So that creates a partnership between the business community and the regulators that really makes for some flexibility.
Okay, so it's really that use of sort of the special permit in all of these cases and the allowance of that in the recodification of the bylaw. That's sort of what we're talking about when we're talking about kind of creativity and flexibility in terms of what could be developed.
I think zoning ought to frame a partnership between the regulated and the regulator so that there's some elbow room for creativity. And that's certainly something I've been doing a long time in my work. I've done I think I've over 100 cities and towns at this point. It's been a lot of fun, and I get to learn everybody's political background. Mm-hmm. I live in Concord, so we don't have a political background in Concord.
Well, certainly the 100 communities you've worked with is probably a big part of the reason.
The prison's coming down, so
that's
we'll
true.
have to see.
Shifting gears a little bit, another question I wanted to ask was in relation to some of the more recent zoning changes. So, what I don't see in here, obviously, is the MBTA communities overlay district that we passed at town meeting. Obviously, that still has to be formally approved by the state, which we expect it will be. It didn't look like there were any changes that reflected the new state laws around accessory dwelling units. I was wondering if you could speak, either Mr. Lieber or Mr. Bobrowski, just from a process standpoint, how does that fit in with this whole process? Is that something that comes in version 9 or 10 when those things are sort of riper for inclusion? Do they sort of stand on their own? I would imagine some adjustments would have to be made because the overlay bylaw tracks back to the existing Chapter 190 in our bylaws, not what we're trying to recodify.
So I'll give a preview, and then Attorney Bobrowski can give more details on that. So it's a conscious decision to not include things that have not yet been approved by the Attorney General. So where the MBTA communities bylaw was approved by the town meeting in November, it's in the 90-day period where the municipal law unit is looking at it. Once that part has concluded and it will ultimately get published, at that point Attorney Bobrowski will incorporate it fully into the bylaw. Similarly, for things such as the accessory dwelling unit changes, which are still in process, the state laws and regulations are still in process. Until those components are ready, it doesn't make sense to put those into a town draft componentry.
So, yeah, I know there's another group working on the ADU. I've taken the trouble to take the legislation and flag the differences. For example, where it says you can do this by special permit and the certain size has to be observed, no special permit. Yeah. I've redlined your existing accessory apartment bylaw to show you how you might convert one to the more compliant version. But we're still waiting. I think the only one we've done that has been recent has been the self-storage overlay district, which is now in the, I took it apart, but it's now in the bylaw, the draft.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that. And just as a final comment, I also appreciate, Mr. Lieber, you mentioning the fact that the intention here is not to change our zoning through this process, right? And I think this is going to be something that as we go through the process, I want to make sure that folks in town understand that, this is really, by and large, a housekeeping activity to make sure that we have, that's dismissing, it's making it sound dismissive of the work that you've done, and that's not the intention. But again, we haven't really made explicit policy decisions around zoning. There is sort of a time and a place to do that elsewhere, but this is really intended to take what was a very old, very cobbled together set of bylaws and make it something that reads coherently, that's easier to maintain, that's easier for folks to use. So again, appreciate the work that's gone into that.
And that's well stated. It is intended to take the intent of the bylaws and recodify them. And I state that I'm stating that in that way because there are non-substantive changes that are designed to really enhance what the intent of the existing bylaws is. An example of that is there are additional uses that are defined as possibilities, such as the ability to have breweries. Right now, we don't have a definition to have a brewery. So we're adding definitions for breweries and distilleries and microbreweries as different options so that those could be things that it might spark an idea and someone says, hey, I want to open up a business that does some of these activities. And the intent for that was never prohibited in the existing bylaws, but it wasn't expressly permitted. But the concepts of having creative ideas was certainly there. So in that way, this is taking that housekeeping activity and making it more concrete so that people can have new ideas and really expand upon it for the current generation and the generations that follow us. Because this type of activity, given the amount of work and the amount of change that happens, tends to last quite a long time. And so the idea is to get it very close to right, and by the same token, to set the expectation. There will be additional changes that need to continue to be made, and there are likely to be additional components that come before the next annual town meeting, the financial town meeting in the fall, and beyond. So it's not a one and done. It's recodifying the majority of the process, renumbering the entirety of the bylaws, and then whatever else needs to be cleaned up will happen over time as well. And will happen in some cases by other committees, groups, and bodies as appropriate. And that's just part of living in a town and being part of good governance.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate all your work.
Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Thank you for the presentation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Brabowski will be at the town meeting to answer questions as well.
Yes.
Which is very good because he makes zoning bylaws sound fun, and it'd be nice to have him be able to share that funness with the rest of the town meeting. I thought we were busy when we served on the bylaw review committee in 2017. But having served as your liaison, not this past year, but for the first 2 years, I have to commend your bylaw review committee with the tremendous amount of work that you all had to do on something that's very tedious and very meticulous. And also what was significant to me was the very positive working relationship with Mr. Brabowski and the rest of the bylaw review committee. I thought that made the process much, much easier than it had to be, and that's a testament to your leadership on it, Dan, and your professionalism, Mr. Brabowski. So I thank you all of you here tonight, for the work that you've done on something that this, as you mentioned, this town needed to do for many decades. So thank you.
Thank you. And it's a great committee for both the current members and those who have not been able to continue in their work. Every single member has had a significant contribution.
Councilor Butler.
Sure, thanks. Just a quick question. I guess I'm seeing the major proposals. It really does seem like, and I guess maybe it's every 5 years you focus on some different area of the bylaws to really hone in on. This seems to be really solely driven on both zoning and sort of streets and sidewalks. Those are the two sections that it looks like you're hitting a ton with changes. Were there other areas of the bylaws that you dug through in this review, or was it really focusing on that sort of area that had probably been neglected, the zoning and streets and sidewalks area?
So it's a fantastic question, and that's one where we had the privilege of working with Attorney Mullen as town council for Wakefield to actually go through the entire set of bylaws with the work that Councilor Vincent was referencing. Most of those bylaws were actually remain in really current shape and are still appropriate for the town. So there was a review of those bylaws as well, and continues to be. There are other changes that are being discussed that go beyond that. There are several other areas that I expect will also come up at the town meeting as well for other pieces that have been recently discussed. So it expands upon just the areas of zoning, streets and sidewalks and naming and other elements. So there are quite a few changes, and some have already been adopted by the town.
Okay, thanks. And then I forget this from at town meeting. It isn't a piecemeal adoption. It's a either adopt the revisions or don't. And that's probably for Mullen or Councilor Mullen. Like, how does the bylaw review get, once they present their approved list, is it an up or down vote from the townsfolk?
No, in the past, we have had articles that dealt with particular bylaws, and then when there were little changes, like grammatical changes or very minor wording changes, like gendering, for example, we would include them in a single omnibus article.
Okay.
For purposes of a recodification, I think you can break it up into multiple articles. You could do it in a single article.
My preference is always to do it in a single article, and it basically will say delete these head captions from the old existing bylaw and substitute the new chapter headings from the new bylaw, taking care to keep the map, for example, not forgetting about it, or the various maps, because you have 5 or 6. And then it's an up or down vote. Generally, at town meeting, I would walk through the sections, asking if there are any questions, answering, sometimes treating it like the budget, where if somebody wants to hold, and we'll come back to it. But that's really just a format question. And it tends to work if the people can see the document in its entirety unfolding as the night progresses.
Just a couple of quick questions, gentlemen. There was an indication that ZBA initially thought very recently that May town meeting might be a little bit premature. Has that been ironed out?
So we just came out of a meeting with them prior to this meeting, and while no decision has been made, amongst the elements that was discussed was the ability to do this in different town meetings. So to do the main componentry of the recodification, which is largely renumbering, putting in elements, and then knowing that there will be certain elements, perhaps signage, perhaps performance standards, that we intentionally put in either a placeholder or other elements that we know will need to be changed, and those get deferred to future town meetings. So that's a decision that will need to be made as to the scope of the change that is desired for the first town meeting, and whether we try to delay putting in the recodification for changes that we know are going to happen, or do we just go forward with a point in time and then know that future changes will go and get cleaned up at future town meetings? And that no decision has been made on that aspect. Okay. But it is something that was certainly discussed, and there are valid reasons for both going forward at the annual town meeting in May or delaying to a November town meeting.
Great, thanks for the clarification. Technical legal term, doesn't look like there's a lot of new stuff. It's a recodification. But I do see senior housing, and that looks like that's perhaps a new addition?
Yes, there's an assisted living overlay district, but it's a generation old. Okay. There's, the new model is independent living, assisted living, memory units, skilled nursing. I think you have all those components, but it's not treated as again, an organic whole. My parents just went through this process, and I learned a lot about it. I currently represent some CCRCs, which is an entirely different animal, because there's a lifetime contract that the patient has or the client has with the facility unlike a standalone assisted living facility. But with our generation aging, my generation aging, this is, I think the peak of the baby boom in terms of the number of people was just last year.
Mm-hmm.
Reaching the age of
1958.
65.
Yeah, I was very interested in that, and I'm curious about that. I assume you've reached out to planning board and our senior planner on that, Mr. Lieber, on the senior housing. Have you done any outreach?
There's been outreach to many different
Sure.
departments.
Just so you know, I'm also a member of our Affordable Housing Trust that we set up not all that long ago. So maybe we can have an agenda item, maybe a quick fill-in on that at some point. No rush, but I think the Housing Trust would also be interested in senior housing. The only other question I have was I have, in addition to many things they're working on, I believe the Conservation Commission may right now be working on a wetlands bylaw rewrite. Does that interact here, or is that a separate kettle of fish? Might ask all the lawyers in the room if anybody knows. I was just curious. Were you aware, Mr. Lieber, that they might be working on a new wetlands bylaw?
I'm having a little bit of trouble
Oh,
hearing.
it's a wetlands bylaw
Oh.
from the Conservation Commission. I didn't know whether that was within your purview.
No, typically that's a general bylaw that's adopted. The Conservation Commission administers it. So it's a whole different arena.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I had. Any other counselors' questions? Counselor Butt?
Just a comment. Thank you so much, everyone that's working on this. I know, as a former member of the Charter Review, I know there's a lot of work to be done. I just was looking at your website that I hadn't looked at, and everything's up there. It's so great to be able to find things and find the drafts and previous meetings. I would encourage whatever town meeting we do go to think about just doing some forums or highlighting your meetings, because I think a lot of people learn through talking and not necessarily reading bylaws. Non-lawyers don't always love reading that stuff, but I really look forward to hearing more about as we get closer to whichever town meeting you guys are going to present in. And I thank all the members of the committee that are here and virtually watching.
I can honestly say it's a collaborative effort, working with Administrator Mayo's office and working with Sherry Dalton has been fantastic to get the website managed in a way that there's a lot of information, easily accessible, so that if someone wants to see where the information is, it's there. The organization is specifically designed to make the process very apparent. So that if someone wants to see, okay, where are we? We're in draft 7. So what did the prior drafts look like? They're there. Well, why isn't there a draft 4? Well, there's an explanation. We never saw it. That was an internal draft. So the idea is to make things as accessible as possible, to make the process very open, so that anyone from the town feels that they can give input, should give input, and fortunately a lot of people are. And we continue to get a lot of people coming to give input, positive, negative, and otherwise, on different aspects of zoning and other bylaws. Zoning is something that affects all of us, whether we live in a single-family home, whether we live in congregate care, whether we live in an apartment, whether we live in a condo. Zoning affects what we can do, where we can do it, how we do things. It affects our quality of life. And so this recodification really is significant, and to make it as transparent as possible for people is very important to the committee. We have a great division of labor as to who will take minutes for different meetings. We don't have professional staff outside of Attorney Bobrowski, and so we handle that. We get information up as much as possible. Our meetings are currently done in a hybrid format, so that similar to this meeting, where people can be in person and or online, we're showing other boards how to do that successfully. And it works, because it becomes a part of good governance and good community. So thank you.
Councilor Chang.
Just a super quick thing, kind of building off of the communication piece. One thing that is in our packet that I found really helpful was a crosswalk between the the existing bylaw and the new bylaw. And I might suggest that that's a document that, as you do additional drafts that go up on the website, that be available to the public as well. You know, again, just to kind of understand what's changed and what hasn't. I found that exceptionally helpful.
I'm not sure what's on the website, but I also have done, at least through the first 4 or 5 drafts, a color-coded bylaw that has black text for existing, yellow for new, strikeout, where some things have gone to the, to the recycle bin.
Thank you.
Councilor Butler.
Sorry. I'm also, I guess I am a little confused around that, and maybe it's nothing, but that the allows for expanded services there, the notion of a senior housing district or a senior, like, it's a little uncomfortable for like sort of the bylaw review to be proposing almost the creation of a, almost a legislative approval of developing senior housing. Like, I don't think I want your committee to be doing that, but I don't know that I want the town as a whole to be getting in the business of carving out sort of special interest housing development just for seniors. And, I ran this past year, so I can say that. I guess I don't love the idea of that our one idea is to do some sort of grant to the senior community.
Can I maybe ask a
Or
question?
maybe I'm not understanding what you're doing.
May I?
Yeah.
Ann Santos, member of the bylaw committee. We had an assisted living district, but what's there now is not just assisted living. That's the term that was used when it was first created.
For any sort of senior housing, so it's essentially updating that.
We're updating that because what is there now is senior housing. It's assisted living, it's independent living. So I don't think we are creating something new. I think we're changing that term to encompass what we already had and what was intended when that bylaw was enacted.
Okay.
Does that sound right? Okay.
If I could just sort of piggyback on that, working in this space, I mean, that is kind of the sort of the more modern connotation of how what was formerly called assisted living is built, where it tends to be this idea of sort of flexible housing for seniors where you can age in place with different levels of services. So I guess when I saw that, that was my thinking, was this is just more of a modernization of the words used and kind of the uses described by those words in the bylaw rather than kind of creating something new out of whole cloth.
A classic example is Carlton Willard in Bedford.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. You all set?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for the presentation. Thanks very much for all the committee members' work. Thanks for all the volunteer work in the town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will be seeing you again, I'm sure.
Very soon.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we at the senior center renovations? Town administrator?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, senior center reservations, item D. I had invited, and I don't know if she's online, Nancy Bertrand. Sherry, is Nancy Bertrand attending tonight?
Yeah, she is. She's here. She will be keeping on her camera momentarily.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Bertrand. Mike McLean, Town Council Chair. I invited you this evening. I just wanted to give a little history of this from my perspective. My involvement began when a citizen indicated that the senior center, former Warren School, was on the National Historic Register. I did a little bit of online research and thought that since we were using ARPA funds, which to me are federal funds, that we should run this by Mass Historical Commission as opposed to just not to diminish you guys, the Wakefield Historical Commission, we did ask them about the windows. I think Councilor Mullen thought in an email that that was a good procedure that we went through, to be careful. It looks like they have declined any type of jurisdiction on this. But nonetheless, you know, I have seen, and we have all seen letters from you and, you know, findings of your committee, so I wanted you to have the chance to, you know, tell us your opinion about the windows in the senior center and your opinion relative to the use of wood as opposed to composite material or some other material.
Yes, Mr. McLean, thank you for inviting us to have some input. I did send you a letter on December 18th, which kind of summed up our opinion. The Wakefield Historical Commission actually met a few days before and discussed it, and universally believes that we should use wooden windows, historically appropriate wooden windows. This is in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior's standards for restoration and rehabilitation of historic places, which is the industry standard for historic buildings. The Commission's views were guided by talks with neighbors, local preservationists, and local architects. In the words of one local architect, very well respected and known, in the Warren School, the windows are the building. The building was constructed in 1895-97 and appears in the National Register of Historic Places and is one of the town's premier historic sites, proudly serving the community still as the John McCarthy Senior Center, as you very well know. The Commission favors the phased replacement of the windows over several years in a way that can be worked out with the Capital Planning Committee. I understand that the job that Chris Pierce of the DPW has tried to do with the ARPA funds was much bigger than the funding that was available to do the whole project, and that he's done a great job with limited resources. However, the fact that it is a building which is on the National Register means to us that we should dignify it with a proper restoration on the outside. And especially this year when we, the Warren School, of course, is named after our hometown hero, Major Horace M. Warren, wounded many times on the field of the Civil War battles, whose courage, patriotism, and valor was unmatched even in a generation of heroes. And so I'm asking, or the Historical Commission is asking the Town Council to please help us to continue to honor the building with the appropriate restoration materials. One option, one compromise option might be to use, if it needs to be vinyl windows on one side, to use them on the back of the building, since the Secretary of Interior standards specifies that the more prominent views should be treated most carefully.
Is that it, Ms. Bertrand?
That's it.
Okay, I don't want to cut you off. Were you around or were you involved with, you had mentioned that there had been some wood replacements done through capital planning or, you know, a number of years back. Do you have any recollection of that? I don't know if you were involved in that.
No, I don't believe, I don't know if replacement windows were put into the Warren School. The school sat empty, completely empty for a good 10 years after being taken offline as a school, until we brought WCAT into one portion of the building. And then after a time, the building, of course, was taken over by the senior center. Now, some work might have been done on the exterior of the building at the time, but I don't remember that.
Okay. Have you ever been involved in restoration, projects involving restoration of, my feeling is that one of the things that hasn't been considered as of yet is that if you replace with new wood, all wood rots, but that old wood, my house predates this building, I believe, and we have replaced wood, and we've replaced windows, and we've replaced them with composite, but we've never replaced one board of that old wood. So I'm wondering whether, another option here might be restoration. And I know there's a company in Waltham that does it. Can't say that, I have done any research. I'm not running this project, but I know that that's something that could be considered.
Well, certainly if the current windows could be restored, that would be the best alternative. I'm not sure that using composite is the best way to go. Certainly when we replaced the windows at the West Board School in the 90s, we used historically appropriate exact representations of the original. I've been involved in restoration projects for the past 40 years or so, but I'm not a building or trade expert.
Right. Any questions from any counselors? Counselor Vincent?
Thank you, Chair McLean. Thank you, Nancy, for your presentation. I just wanted to augment a little bit of what you said with the Secretary of the Interior standards. I believe the standards also indicate that as one of the few parts of a historic building serving both as an interior and exterior feature, windows are an important part of the historic character of a building. Windows comprise a considerable amount of the historic fabric of the wall plane and deserve special consideration in a rehabilitation project. And I think those components are important as well to mention. Also, I believe that the Warren School has approximately 120 windows when you look at all 3 floors. And I know Karen's here. I believe they're wood windows. The majority are wood windows. What you said, Nancy, about the compromise with the front windows, I believe when you look at the number of windows on the second floor, they total 44. Of those 44, 15 are in the front, 7 are on the left side, 16 are in the rear, and 6 are on the right side. So you indicated a compromise. Would you be satisfied if a decision was made to hold off on replacing the 15 windows in the front of the building on the second floor? That would constitute 15 of the approximate 121 wood windows that are in the building. Just taking note, and I know this project is only dealing with the second floor. It's not dealing with all those other windows on the first floor. But would you be comfortable if the town council made the decision to not take any action right now on the 15 windows in the front, and instead the Historical Commission and the town consult with a preservation expert, similar to what the DPW did with the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial, to determine whether to restore or replace these windows in order to preserve their historical significance? Would that be okay with you and the Historical Commission, if you can speak for them?
I believe I probably can speak for them. I would want us to be an active part of the Historical Commission whenever this project should happen sometime in the future, to be an active part of that selection of the expert, etc. Because sometimes the work of what is going on with the DPW is a little obscure to us, and so I'd like to be more of a partner in restoration efforts.
And I think you know this probably better than anyone else in the Wakefield community, given your experience with the Historical Commission and your interest. But because we're not a Community Preservation Act municipality, we don't have that tax levy to help preserve historic structures. So we have no ongoing source of money for preservation and maintenance of these structures. And what I found in my 10 years here in Wakefield is we had to do things on kind of an ad hoc basis. Like the gazebo repairs were based on grant and other funding outside of taxpayers' money. The Little Red Schoolhouse repairs were just recently done, mostly based on ARPA money that we moved over there. And of course, the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial was a combination of ARPA money and the town meeting decision in the spring of '23 to fund the $300,000 to repair them. So because we don't have a source of income, we have to take each project as it presents itself to us, like this one. And to me, what's prudent is to have the DPW and the Historical Commission work with and consult with a preservation expert, at least for the 15 windows in the front, because you are correct. The Secretary of the Interior Standards does denote that the front windows should be favored with the most careful treatment, because that's the most prominent part of a building.
Well, I think I'd feel more comfortable if the town council would kind of put this on the capital planning schedule, so that it's not going to get shelved indefinitely. The replacement of the front windows.
All right, thank you very much.
Questions from other councilors? Councilor Chang.
Not a question, but just a couple of comments and thoughts about sort of where we are. So first of all, I want to start by saying, a number of us had the opportunity to go over to the senior center and, kind of look at the windows, look at the renovations, and setting aside the window question, I do want to start just by saying that I am very excited about how the renovations to the senior center are going. The space looks phenomenal. And the fact that we're going to be able to use that for additional programming as we intended, I think is really something special. And so, Ms. Burke, thank you for walking me through the other day, and Mr. Conway, to you and Mr. Pierce and your teams, thank you for the work that's gone into that. This is a historic structure, but it's also a working structure. And to be able to see parts of this building kind of come to life and be activated in a way that it hasn't been for so long is incredibly exciting to me. When I did look at the windows, I have to be honest, I was kind of prepared to hate them. Because of the historic piece. I didn't think that the composite windows looked bad at the end of the day. I actually thought they looked nice and were fitting with the building. They're not wood, and if you see them up close, that's clear. But I do think that we have to look at the balance between the historic components of the building and the fact that this is a building that is actively under use. For me, am less concerned about the cost of replacing with wood. I think if that's something we have to do through capital planning, that's fine. I am concerned twofold. One, about the ability for seniors who are using the senior center to open and close the heavy wooden windows. One of the newer windows that was there, one of the newer windows, it took two of us to open and close it when I had my walkthrough, which is problematic. I am more concerned as well about just the ongoing maintenance of the wood windows. The ones that are there right now are in pretty bad shape, and I don't think that that is a reflection of bad maintenance on the part of the DPW. I think it's a reflection on the fact that wooden windows are very, very hard to maintain. They need to be reglazed and repainted constantly. Any of us who've had wooden windows in our homes has kind of experienced that. And so I appreciate, Councillor Vincent, sort of your approach in terms of looking at this in potentially a different way of coming up with a compromise approach, because I do think that that reflects sort of the balance that we have to draw, which is making sure that, again, we're respecting and honoring the historic components of the building, but also making sure that it is a building that, our employees, our seniors can use, and something that we can maintain up to the standards that it should be maintained. I think the worst thing that would happen is if we do go with all wooden windows, but we don't have a plan, we don't have the funding, we don't have the staff, we don't have the contractor availability to make sure that we're reglazing and repainting and maintaining every year, and that the appearance of the building suffers as a result. I think that would be the worst of all worlds. So I like the idea of trying to figure out if there are ways that we can come up with a compromise that allows us to, again, reflect all of these different interests in a thoughtful way.
Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Yeah, I appreciate that. Councilor Chines, Karen, could you come up to the table for me, please? So I did go over there today and met with Karen as I did the other day as well, but this time specifically to look at the windows in the front and what those spaces would be used for, and would senior citizens be in a position to go in there and actually open those windows? So help me if I say anything that's mistaken here. 4 of them are in the stairwell area, 4 of those 15 windows. And unless you're Porzingis or Hartford, who are the centers for the Boston Celtics, you can't reach those 4. So seniors aren't going to go and touch those 4. They're in the stairwell. 1 is in a storage room that you would be under your control. 2 are in one office, and 2 others are in a second office. One of those offices is going to be for the Veteran Service Officer, and then the other office, you intend to use it for whom?
Or visiting services that come and provide things for the seniors, so fuel assistance, Mystic Valley Elder Services, counseling, things like that.
So there'd be a paid official that would be in there using that office. Although I understand seniors would be in there.
Yeah,
And
they
then
wouldn't be alone in there.
There was the bathroom. I admit that one. The bathroom would be one where a senior could go in to use the facility and use the window. And then the other 5, I think I've counted up 10 so far, were in that reception area in the center part of the building where you'd have a reception area. And I do understand that it wouldn't be manned all the time. But as you and I saw today, if a senior were to open any of those 5 windows, obviously the windows could come down on them. I understand we have to work that part. But if they were to work and they couldn't, if they fell out of those 5, it is a 1-foot drop onto the terrace in the center part of the building. They're not going to fall all the way down to the ground. So I'm not as concerned about the seniors on the 15 windows that are in the front of the building. That's why I've come up with this compromise of preserving the 15 windows in the front of the building to allay some of the genuine concerns that you had, Councilor Chines. I just think we're not in a rush on this. Even if we end up using ARPA funds for this, we don't have to spend our ARPA funds until December of 26. If we were to take the estimate from the current company on wood windows, those 15 wood windows would cost $75,000. That's not a huge ask, I think, at a town meeting. I think one of the things that's important to me is that an integral part of the fabric of being a New Englander is understanding the importance of preserving history. And I really do think Wakefield citizens are proud of their role in American history, and they showed that when they allocated unanimously $300,000 to restore the Soldiers and Sailors Civil War Memorial back in the spring of '23 town meeting. So to me, just holding off on taking any action on the 15 windows in the front is, to me, a reasonable compromise so that we can have DPW and the Historical Commission work with a preservation expert, just like the company Daedalus, the company that we ended up using and hiring to restore the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial, something like that, who specializes in windows. And then we can come back at a later date and assess whether we want to put the vinyl windows up, do we want to put wooden windows up, can we repair them and restore them instead of replacing them? I just don't think time's of the essence that we have to make that decision on those 15 windows in the front tonight.
Councilor Kearney.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I thought if we went with the wood windows, that they're gonna look differently.
That's a valid point, because the town administrator.
Valid point.
Town administrator is.
There's a practicality of this. One, if you look at the building now, you'd like it to look the same.
Yeah.
And the practicality is, this is gonna be we're investing a fortune in this building. And we want it to be useful, and that we don't want any restrictions on how we do it. And I understand that preservationists and the historical people, are looking at this, and I appreciate their input. But honestly, I don't think we should kick the can down the road on this issue, because we don't know the money's going to be available in the future. My own opinion. I think we ought to go with the option 2, put attractive windows in there we can afford now and get the job done, personally.
Gotcha. Let me say what I agree with and what I disagree with. And Jonathan, I know I'm going to shock you, but we agree on something. Okay? We agree that the work that has been done is excellent.
Amazing.
It's excellent. I mean, those hardwood floors are gleaming. The painting, painted a lot in my day. It's not my profession. Painting is really good.
Great color, too.
Great color. We love the color. We all love the color. So the work's fine. But we're talking about the windows, and I think where we diverge a bit is when we talk about it, well, it's a working structure. I don't want that to be, perceived as meaning, well, since it is a working senior center, we don't have to worry about this issue, because I do worry about this issue. Now, town administrator has indicated that our current vendor would have different wood windows, because the muntin, which is that semicircular piece on the top, would not have glass. Well, I'm very opposed to that, but that doesn't mean that there's not a muntin glass wood window out there somewhere. And in addition to that, I don't necessarily.
It wouldn't have wood, not, it would have glass, it wouldn't have wood.
Correct.
It would have glass, not wood.
At the
Okay,
top, correct.
so at least it wouldn't be dark. But again, we haven't even looked into preservation. And there are companies that say, for example, the new wood rots quicker than the old wood. And I don't know how much it would cost per window to consult a true preservationist, but they use the old wood. Now, it's not like the composites don't have an unlimited life either. So, I mean, if we had an option of getting 15 preserved windows at whatever cost that might be, if we chose as a council to do it, that would be maintaining those beautiful windows that we have. And it's just amazing to me. I mean, the people that came before us, I mean, shame on us if these windows are falling apart. Shame on us. Because the people that came before us, they built buildings like this with windows like this for schools. As school buildings. My goodness. That to me is extremely impressive. And yeah, we've fallen off. Now, these windows didn't degrade overnight. It didn't just happen overnight. We could have had a plan and process. And have we used capital funding? Joe, we used it on the Civil War Memorial. I actually thought we were going to fund that through ARPA, and but then I noticed that DPW had picked it up, and capital planning was 2.4 instead of 2.2, whatever the number was, a little bit higher. We had the money, we spent it, and we're doing it right. I'm not plugging for any particular companies, but there's a company out there, a landscaping company, the name is Done Right. That's what I'd like to do with these windows. I'd like to do them right. So, I think a compromise is in order. And I don't disagree with your sentiments, Councilor Carney, either. I mean, you got to do the cost-benefit analysis. I get that. But I mean, if we're getting 3 banks of windows, at the lower cost, maybe we can defer and take our time and do the front, in a different fashion. I just think that they, looking into preservation of those windows with that old wood that just does not rot anywhere near as fast as new wood. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it could wind up being cost effective, might be a little bit more per window, but they might last another forever or for a longer period of time. How often do they have to be reglazed? I don't know. But these are things that really preservation hasn't been looked into at all in this project. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying, maybe a compromise is not a terrible idea. Those are just my thoughts.
Can I add one thing, if you don't
Certainly.
mind? First of all, it is great that we did have the ARPA funds to use on projects like this. And I will tell you, in talking to Karen and talking to the seniors that go to the senior center, they really feel, this is a feel-good part, they really feel very valued. This community spends a lot of money on schools, and rightly so. And, the senior center, which was refurbished, I'm going to say late 90s, 1990s, that period of time. And then really we haven't had the wherewithal to do anything since then. So they really feel valued and are really excited about the extra spaces and things that can go on there. And, I go there often, and I think it's great. You've done a great job with them, Karen. I also want to give Joe and his team a lot of credit for really, when they don't have to statutorily anyway, they do work with the Historical Commission when they can. That really happened on the Little Red Schoolhouse. We took some extra DPW money to do the chimney along with the roof, and that really worked out well. The Hartshorn House, we've done some great work here. So Joe's done a real great job, and his team has. I do appreciate it that the Historical Commission, their preferred option, and I'm not saying that they want, but of the 2 vinyl choices or composite choices, it was option 2, right, Nancy? So we do agree with option 2 is the better option of those 2.
Yep.
Yep.
The better of the.
The better of the 2, exactly.
Better of the 2.
So I do appreciate that because, Chris Pierce was great about getting 2 windows so you could see what they looked like. I do feel, for a lot of reasons, I think that the composite is safer, cheaper, and will be more efficient, be more energy efficient. However, I'll leave it to, if Joe wants to add anything on that. He's the construction expert, I'm not.
So I apologize. Chris Pierce, the building manager, is traveling out of the country this evening, so you have the B team, but I'll do my best. So just to go back on as far as the preservation is concerned, so it's no secret that we've been elbow deep with that, just with everything going on in the common. And as we're putting feelers out to that, we started asking the questions, they were met with a sigh. We weren't able to track down anybody with the bandwidth or the ability to hit the deadlines that we had related to ARPA and the expenditure timelines and things like that. The next thing we did was try to see what a wooden window cost. The Muntins piece came up. That was a non-starter just because that we felt through Public Works that was more of a fabric change than not. Chris, our buildings manager, set out with 2 different demos to see. Those were custom designed, custom done. We saw the first one, we got feedback. We essentially went back to them and said, do better, mimic what's there. The whole intent with the window piece, it all started really, aside from looking at, the way the condition of the building was and knowing that it needed to no longer be out of sight, out of mind and get cleaned up, how's it going to function? So, the elephant in the room, for lack of a better term, was the occupancy change that was about to happen, how the seniors were going to use the space, the consideration as far as maintenance, warranties and things like that. Anybody that entertained wood, once you got it, you owned it. So if it broke, it was on to us to fix it. If we're to use a different option, we could potentially get 20-year warranties for parts and manufacturing on the windows. But really what it boiled down to is the buildings team got together with Karen and said, how are you going to use this? What's the space going to look like? Keep in mind, we do not have any HVAC in there. Everybody thinks cooling, everybody thinks heating, but that also means fresh air. So there's no ductwork doing returns or things like that. So if we had the ability to come up with something that brought as much of that into that space as we could, we wanted to try to do that. Working with Karen, obviously, thinking about the seniors and the safety of it, we knew that we didn't want to entertain anything that opened in, that was too heavy for them to pick up should they need to. So we kind of threw everything together and kind of landed at this compromise where, we sought out to get something aesthetically as close to the original as you could. The only difference being, a slight variation in the fact that it was made out of a composite material and not, the wood that might have been done back when they were put in. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest of the story to this point, and here we are.
Did you pick the Anderson version or the Harvey?
What's going in there is a custom-made Harvey. The Anderson gave us numbers on the wooden ones that were approximately 185% more just to produce the window. And then there was a question on whether or not they call them Muntins, but it's really the lattice work, which is the half moon piece to the top. They were a little wishy-washy on whether or not they thought that they could replicate that in kind to the true form that the existing windows in presently.
And the wood window you've looked at, is that a Harvey or is that a separate manufacturer?
That was something that came directly to us from Anderson. So that would be Anderson taking what's there and giving us budgetary quotes to replicate that 8-foot by 3.5-foot window with the half moon top pieces to it.
And when you say ARPA deadlines, I mean, the ARPA deadline, that 400 is spoken for. That's going to be spent. And it's going to be spent well before 2026 under a compromise or a non-compromise vote by this council.
So that was one of the things that we couldn't lock down, is if we did have someone come out and try to recreate or rebuild what was there, getting them to give us a timeline that they could stick to.
What did you seek actual preservationists?
We couldn't get anybody that would give us an answer. So we utilized the folks that helped us with the bandstand to try to tap into their network. And with the speed that everything was going, we weren't able to have anybody take a seat at the table and give us anything that we knew that we were on a path for success.
Councilors?
Yeah.
Councilor Butler?
I'm sorry. You submitted the proposal to Mass Historical, or Mass Historical didn't need, this is not something that falls within the purview, this sort of amendment. I couldn't understand that letter that was sent over from the Mass Historical Commission.
Correct. So I think the official, I don't have the letter in front of me, but they declined to comment via there was no federal permits or federal funding.
Meaning we don't have to ask them.
Correct.
Okay.
Bottom line.
So the bottom line is we're being nice here, and you know it's great. There's a day where you and Jonathan are agreeing. This is a day when John and I are in agreement. I'm like, it seems like we have a solution that is aesthetically pleasing enough, and it is a living, breathing building. It is an in-use building. It is not the Little Red Schoolhouse. It isn't a memorial. It isn't something that is not intended to be used. It's living and breathing. We should just fix the windows in a way in which I'm not even sure why this is before us. This should just be handled by the building department. And if there were historical commission issues, then that would come up with the historical commission. But there doesn't seem to be. So I don't even know why we're actually voting on this, but if we are, I would vote for them to implement their plan as they see fit. Wood or vinyl, but apparently it's vinyl.
Understand. Any other questions from councilors? Any motions to be made?
I move that we place the windows with the vinyl option that was the best option for Nancy and her folks out of the vinyl windows.
So option number 2.
I guess
Is
please.
that
Number
two?
two.
Number 2.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Councilor Chines.
Just a question from Mr. Conway. So just thinking about this from a timing standpoint, if we were to do something different with the 15 front windows, we were sort of back to square one in terms of going out to a preservationist based on the conversations you've been able to have so far?
We would have to defer to have that conversation with at least, one person party that, could honor what we're trying to get to. There'd be some more due diligence that would need to happen for that to move forward.
And then I know today in front of most of the existing windows on the inside, there's basically like a plexiglass storm window, if you will, that sits on the inside.
Right.
My assumption would be that the recommendation would be that, to the extent that we don't replace any of the windows, that would remain.
It would probably be presumptuous for me to say that
never came true.
that was going to happen. I think what we would do is evaluate them and make them as safe as possible for the time being while they sat and a decision was made. So it could be a piece of Lexan or plexiglass is needed. The windows might have to be screwed shut to hold them in place, but we'd really have to get up there and get hands-on with it.
But I would imagine, at least in terms of the windows where you have that plexiglass already, if those windows are staying for a period of time, we're not taking anything down.
If it's pre-existing, we would just leave it be for right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Did you have a comment, Nancy? I'm sorry.
I did. I just want to make clear that, first of all, the only reason that the Mass Historical Commission would not have anything to say about the windows replacement is the fact that they were being funded by ARPA funds. So, and they don't have any kind of anything to do with funding by ARPA. I also want to make clear that at no time were we asked for or working with Mr. Pierce, who we have a great relationship with and we like very much. And we know he does a great job, but he never offered us the option of looking into preservation or finding a preservationist. The option we got was vinyl windows. And we could get a preservationist to and a number of the people who were at the Historical Commission meeting, the first one at which this was discussed, actually offered names of various preservation companies But that wasn't an option that was ever given to us. And this is a National Register building, and I think it's a shame that you seem to have already made up your minds about just going with this vinyl window. When you look at a building like the AmeriCal, and Mr. Carney, I know you were on the AmeriCal committee for many, many years, and we have wooden windows in the AmeriCal. Don't we, Mr. Conway?
I believe they might be. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I was on the board of the AmeriCal too for a long time, and I think that they are, and they work very well. So, thank you for taking this under consideration.
Before I get to you, Councilor Vincent, I just wanted to make a clarification based on what you said there, Councilor Chines. And it can be confirmed because Steve and I were in there the other day too. Councilor Carney was in there. Councilor Vincent's been in there a couple of times. We're getting very familiar with the second and third floors of the building. Some of the windows don't have plexiglass. Some of them have an actual glass. I'd call it an internal storm. You know, it's got aluminum or metal frame and glass. So not everything is plexiglass with a window falling apart behind it. Just wanted to make that clear. And I also wanted to say that it took me 5 minutes to find Cleary and Son in Waltham who do this for a living. So it's not that those preservation companies aren't out there. I don't know. I tend to think that here we had an idea, we had a track, we got a good price, and we're going with it, which is fine for those who care to vote for it. But I do think that there are other options here that have not fully been pursued. That's just my own opinion. Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. I didn't bring the resource with me tonight, and I know towns don't want to be compared to Cambridge, but Cambridge, Massachusetts has very strict guidelines for not just historic buildings that are owned by the town or by the city of Cambridge, but residents. When residents want to replace their wood windows, there are very strict requirements about preservation. And there are a litany of preservationists down in the Cambridge area that the Cambridge Historical Commission and the city of Cambridge use. Now, I didn't bring that with me tonight because I didn't think I was going to have to bring that. But I do think that there are certainly preservationists out there that we could avail ourselves to for at least the limited purposes of holding off on the 15 windows in the front of the building. But I've said enough, so I'm done now. Thank you very much.
We have a motion and second. Any further comments or questions from the councilors? Seeing none, there's a motion to approve item 2 on the window design. All those in favor? All opposed? Sherry, that vote is 4-2 in favor. Thank you, Mrs. Bertrand, for all your service. You've given many, many years to this town, and I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I might suggest that you go to the budgets. You could skip over the other two.
What are the other two?
The 2 traffic advisory requests, just because Kevin and Liz have been here. Move them along a little bit quicker.
We've all been here.
I know, but we have to stay.
No offense, Kevin.
Anderson online though?
That's what I'm wondering. Is there anybody else that we'd be bumping that we could get through pretty quickly because we have a number of budgets?
Not to keep you guys here longer, but just.
He usually chimes in as the.
Sherry, do we have anybody here from traffic advisory tonight, like Lieutenant Anderson?
No, not that I see.
Okay, let's move out of line then, and let's go with the budgets. And that is item 7, A through K.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Members of the council. Want to introduce Elizabeth Rourke, the new town accountant.
Bravo.
Liz started Monday of last week, so it's been a lot of fun so far. Steve, I don't know if you want to give a quick lead into this, or should we just jump right in?
I think the council has the package. We took a very careful look at this first round of budgets, sharpened our pencil. Luckily that there are less elections, and we can't take credit for that, but we, get whacked when there are more elections in a year, so I guess we take credit when there aren't. This first group of budgets will come in at, I believe, at a minimum of 0.16% below last year's. There may be some changes suggested, but Kevin and Liz did a great job, and I appreciate the department heads involved here really working hard with us. So without further ado.
Very good. I'll give a quick overview, and then if there's any questions, we can see if we can answer. First budget.
We also have Evan Kenny from the Town Hall Subcommittee.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, that's right.
Hi, Evan.
Hi, Sherry. Good evening, councilors.
Good evening, Mr. Kenny. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to be redundant with what Steve said, but you have 11 budgets here with a net increase, I think, of a half a point. I come to you every year with a group of pretty benign budgets here, and that's a testament to excellent management on the town side. And yeah, like Steve said, we get a nice gift of going from a presidential election year to a year with less planned elections. Of course, if there's a special election, you could see a reserve fund transfer or something of that nature. There's also some downward movement, as Kevin can run you through, in some of the Part 2 sections of these budgets, which is great. We're always monitoring year to year spending, and Kevin and Steve do a great job sort of making sure that we're course correcting whenever spending trends are underneath what's been historically budgeted. So, but without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Evan. First budget is the legal budget. We're recommending that this budget be decreased $1,052 over the current fiscal year. In this budget, there is an increase in personal services for a negotiated 3% increase for the town council. We also decreased the professional services line item $10,000. This is based on prior year usage. We also increased the books and publication line item $5,000, which is used to upkeep the town's legal library. Major expenses within this budget is the outside professional services, $50,000, which is used mainly for labor attorneys and outside expert services as needed. In the books and publications line item, $15,000, which is used for online legal services and to maintain the town's hard copy of the town's legal library. The total budget request is $205,100.
I actually had one question on that, Kevin. It was the only question I had on all these budgets. Well, I had a couple of questions, but they were satisfactorily answered, so you didn't have to. But relative to the legal budget, and Councilor Mullen is here, when I look at a 3-year average and I see us going down 10 grand, but I think we could probably go down another 10,000 because of the 3-year usage of the contract labor was so low.
Yes.
I thought that might be prudent, if only to send a message out there too, that we are going to be looking at these 3-year averages. Why do we have them if we don't look at them, right? And if it looks like we've got some extra money, built into a budget, this is probably the year that I personally would like to take a hard look. And even though these budgets are all coming in great,
right?
Unless there's a reason.
Yeah. The only thing I did want to point out, the last 2 years, yes, were extraordinary years. Didn't spend much in that line item. Between the years fiscal 2019 and 2022, we did have to do reserve fund transfers each of those years. Just to run off, we had to do a reserve fund transfer in fiscal 22, $82,500. Fiscal 21, $50,000. Fiscal 20, $38,850. And in fiscal 2019, $143,300. So there is some history that it doesn't take much of legal services to easily blow through this budget.
Absolutely, I get that. Apparently, we were more litigious before I got on the council.
Yeah.
You're a deal maker.
Councilor Mullen, what do we see coming down the pipe?
I really don't see anything. The problem with that part of the budget is that it can be very high or it could be nothing, depending on what happens. I think some of the high years were when we had to bring in Anderson Krieger, who are excellent, but for things like the Butler Ave environmental litigation, would have been malpractice for anybody but a professional environmental litigator to handle that case.
And we're all good with that now. We're done with that. We are
all done with
We are all done with it, right, right.
That's right.
But things could come up. We're not gonna have 40A litigation because we passed the compromise plan. But there might be something else floating around out there.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm okay with your suggestion. I don't mind it at all. I just want you to understand that it's almost impossible to predict.
Right. 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 Councilor Chun.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm okay with that suggestion. I would just want to make sure that if we do reduce the budget line item for that we don't use that as sort of a reason why we wouldn't hire outside counsel when it's prudent to do so, right? Like, so we've talked about this in other budget line items where we've made cuts over the years. The Veterans Services is an example where we haven't spent up to the cap and we've said it's made sense to reduce the budget, but we're not going to let that cap sort of hold us back from making sure that people will find benefits. This is just an area where I would just want to make sure that, we don't make what might be sort of foolhardy decisions around bringing in outside counsel because we've hit, a $30,000 or $40,000 cap in the budget, knowing that to protect our interests in the town, it may make sense for us to spend more.
I would be shocked if the council would ever do such a foolhardy thing. We're just
I'm sure. I want to say
budgeting
that out loud just
yeah.
because I do think that it's an important
We're talking about
principle.
budgeting. I don't have a big horse in this race.
Yeah.
I want to send the message out that we're going to be looking
Yep.
because this is a tiny group of budgets that's coming in really, really well. But more budgets to come.
Yes.
Larger ones. Yes, sir. Mr. Carney.
Are we anticipating any legal cases regarding the denial of the two?
The 40Bs. That is the only thing that's sitting at the edge of my consciousness, making me wonder, do I want to ask for outside counsel? We've got to think about it. That's all I can say. And I have briefly discussed this with the chair of the ZBA. We haven't come to any conclusions.
If we do outside, we should probably increase this number.
Right.
So we can leave it as is. Let's leave it as is.
Just one thing for
Yes, sir.
Kevin.
Sure.
Line
Absolutely.
5313. I think on the next page you just have it as 55,000.
That is correct. It should be 50.
Okay.
That's a typo.
Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Kevin, I have one question. I didn't think about this until you just made your presentation. I apologize for not asking you in advance. The law library, and maybe there's an answer to this, but under the town bylaw 56-1, I think it is, or 2, the town council is responsible for maintaining the law library. I know mechanically that Mr. Mullen keeps it.
Correct.
But why is, if the town council is legally required to maintain the law library, why isn't that budget item under the town council budget as opposed, town council as in us budget, as opposed to his budget? Because we're the ones legally responsible under the bylaw to maintain the library.
I think it's just historically has been in the legal budget where
That's been the
it's
practice.
used for reference by the town
Okay.
council.
In the future, I'd like to see it be part of this town council budget, where I think it belongs legally speaking. But
Okay.
I may be wrong on that, but that's, I think it's 56-1 or 56-2, that's off the top of my head, but it's the town bylaw.
With no other questions, then I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the legal department budget as presented at $205,100.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Carney. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All opposed? None. 6-0. Sherry. Item B, Budget 7, Tax Collecting Department.
Tax collector's budget, we are recommending an increase to this budget of $10,473. This increase breaks down $5,240 to the tax levy, $5,233 to a water and sewer transfer. There is an increase in personal services, $3,570, which is for contractual and negotiated increases. We just recently, at our last town meeting, settled the clerical contract, so that's included in here. Under contractual services, there's an increase of $1,650 in advertising. There was the total increase in contractual services, $1,650. Advertising increased $1,150. This was due to a change in the tax title law, where we are now required to advertise that in 8 different languages. And we also increased postage $500 due to increased costs. The main expenses within this budget, the printing and binding line item, $6,420, which is used to print the preliminary and actual tax bills. Under professional services, $4,850, which is used for instruments of taking during the tax title process. And the postage line item, $37,000, which is used to mail the real estate, personal property, motor vehicle excise bills. Total budget request for fiscal '26, $328,107, with $260,502 coming from tax levy and $67,605 coming from a water and sewer transfer.
Any questions from councilors on budget number 7? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the fiscal year 2026 budget for the tax collector department at $328,107 as proposed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilor Carney, second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? 6-0, so that's none opposed, so it's 6-0. Sherry, for the record. Item C, budget number 8 is assessing department.
Assessors budget, we're recommending an increase to this budget of $6,385 for fiscal '26. This increase is all in personal services, includes contractual and negotiated increases for all personnel within the department. We also increased the amount Linfield will be paying towards the shared agreement with Wakefield, Reading, and Linfield by $5,000 due to the increased workload in Linfield. Main expenses within this budget, the professional services line item, $21,600, which is used for outside appraisal services, outside personal property services, and expert witnesses for ATV cases as needed. The total budget request for fiscal 2026 is $271,657.
Any questions from councilors on this budget? Councilor Butler.
Just refresh for me, what's the percentage that Reading, Linfield, and us are paying? Or just ballpark it?
The Wakefield and Reading is split evenly, and Linfield, I think, is like a few $1,000s less than the other two.
Okay.
So
It's like
it's about
35, 30.
It's about a third
Like
each.
that. I think that's what it is, 35, 35, 30.
Okay.
And the reason in Linfield is that Linfield has actually 3 tax classifications. We have 2. We have residential and commercial, as does Reading, but Linfield also has a water district. So more time was being spent on that, so I picked up the phone to my very good friend over there and said, we're moving up a little bit. Less, it's smaller community, so there's less tax bills and things like that,
But we end up paying, like, we negotiate all the raises for Victor and his people.
Yes.
It's on us, and then we just bill it out to
Exactly.
them.
On this one, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the fiscal year 2026 budget for the assessors department at $271,657.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilor Carney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? None opposed, that's 6-0. Sherry, item D, budget number 9, town clerk department.
Town clerk's budget, we're recommending that this budget be increased $5,782 over the current fiscal year. There is an increase in personal services, $8,282, which is used for negotiated and contractual increases. Again, the clerical union has been settled, clerical union contract. On the expense portion of this budget, we are decreasing printing and binding at $1,000 and postage $1,500. Last year, we did increase those 2 line items because current year's a presidential election, so there is a lot more activity going on in that department. Next year, there's only one election, so we're able to cut that a little bit. Major expenses within this budget, under the printing and binding, $13,000, which is used to print the town bylaw books, code books, dog licenses, and is also used to bind old birth, death, and marriage certificates. We do collect some funds over the counter in the town clerk's office, approximately $70,000 a year. The total budget request for fiscal '26 is $270,262.
Questions from councilors? Councilor Chines?
I'm going to apologize. I'm asking a question about $700. And I recognize that's a little foolish, but thinking as the chair had mentioned earlier about some of these line items that, have historically spent under the budget amount, we've got $700 budgeted for reproducing supplies that doesn't look like it's been spent over the last 3 years. Is that something we need to maintain?
We could probably reduce some of that.
Can we still buy mimeograph paper?
The purple sheets that you run through the...
You can have my fax machine if you wanted. Any other questions? Entertain a motion with a possible $700 reduction?
Yes, Mr. Chair, move to approve the fiscal year 2026 town clerk budget as presented with the reduction of $700 from line item 5423, reproducing supplies.
Do I have a second? Councilor Carney, question.
Do we really want to reduce it completely?
Yeah, because
I mean,
it
it's
doesn't
kinda
create a
like-
problem if you file something and
Then you have to do a transfer, of how do you handle it afterwards? For a small amount of money, we're talking about.
I mean, candidly, it's $700. I'm also fine if we leave it.
Complication, technically, is it a complication if we under budget something?
So maybe Mr. Gill, if you could.
Yeah.
There will be still that $2,000, I believe, $2,000 within
Because I'm
that
sure there are
line
items that
There-
might
there-
have going over, right? Yeah.
It's not going to cause a huge problem.
Yeah, it won't cause a problem. There will still be $2,000 under office supplies, so if one's over, one's under, it doesn't create an issue.
No problem.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I think actually you formally second.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had seconded, but then raise your hand. Okay, so we got a second, motion second. Anybody further questions on the council?
So this is on the amendment to reduce, or this is on the overall budget?
So the motion was to accept the budget less $700 for that one line
The
item.
specific line item that
So that,
Councilor
If we
Chines.
say yes, we're cutting out the 700.
That is correct. That is correct. All those in favor of the motion? Are you a yes on that one, Councilor Carney?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. 6-0, Sherry. Next budget is number 10, election and registration.
Election and registration, we're recommending that this budget be decreased $3,500 over the current fiscal year. Under the expense portion, we decreased postage by $3,000, and we also decreased the street list by $500. Again, no presidential election next fiscal year, so we're able to reduce a couple of those line items. Main expenses within this budget, under personal services, $17,100, which is used for the census workers. Under contractual services, we have professional services of $12,000. We use a company called LHS, which comes in and helps us with the mailing of the census, printing of ballots as needed, and also maintenance on the voting machines. Total budget request, $38,800.
Questions? Seeing none, would entertain a motion?
Mr. Chair, move to approve the election and registration budget for fiscal year 2026 in the amount of $38,800.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Carney. Any further discussion? All those in favor? 6-0, Sherry. Item F. Budget number 11, election expense.
Election expense budget, we are requesting a decrease to this budget of $26,450 over the current fiscal year. This decrease is based on the number of elections. In the current year, fiscal '25, we have 3 elections budgeted. Next year, we only will have 1, which is the town election. So we were able to reduce that. The total budget request for fiscal '26 is $13,900.
Any questions from the councilors? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, move to approve the election expense budget for fiscal year 2026 in the amount of $13,900.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Carney. No further discussion. All those in favor? That's 6-0, Sherry, and none of you folks can resign in for a special election because we don't have the funding in here. Okay, G is budget number 12, Finance Committee.
Finance Committee budget, we are recommending level funding. Main expenses within this budget, line item for the recommendation book, which is the printing of the recommendation book, which is done in-house, $2,300. In the dues and memberships, cost of $4,000, which is the Finance Committee's portion of the MMA dues. Total budget request is $7,060.
Questions from the council? Seeing none, would entertain a motion.
Move to approve the Finance Committee budget for fiscal year 2026 in the amount of $7,060.
Second.
And seconded by Councilor Carney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Did I get a yes from you, Councilor Buck?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's 6-0, Sherry. Thank you. Item H, budget number 13, Conservation Department.
Conservation Commission budget, we are recommending an increase to this budget of $2,300 over the current fiscal year. This increase is in personal services and is a 3% increase for 1 part-time and 1 full-time conservation agent. 1 agent works 30 hours a week, which is the full-time agent, and we have a part-time agent that works 5 hours a week. This budget is also offset by available funds, which are wetland filing fees, which are level funded at $4,500. Total budget request for fiscal '26 is $87,468, with $82,968 coming from tax levy and $4,500 from available funds.
Questions, Councilor Carney?
I'm confused in my recollection. Obviously, I'm wrong, but I thought they went to town meeting last year and they got an increase in their personal services.
They did. That's why we have the 30 hours, I believe.
So
right?
It was an addition of 30 hours, separate job than the other one.
But it was replacing another 20-hour, was it?
19.
19 hours?
Yeah. So that's baked in, that's last year they got it, so it's the same as last year, basically.
So we have 1 30-hour.
And 1 5-hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right, and that would probably be because of the longevity of the other individual. You know, it's only a $2,300 increase. It's
Right, a
very small.
3% increase.
3%,
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Councilor?
Steve, how is that staffing going? We haven't really heard.
We
since
have no issues at all. I mean, I didn't think we had issues before, but we have no issues at all now. Ethan's really good to work with. He's there every day. So I think we're doing good. They're doing the wetlands bylaw, which is some work that they're going to have to work on. So I think it's working very well. I have no complaints from any public not being able to meet with them or anything like that. So I think it's going well.
And they are continuing to work on the open space.
On the open space.
I understand, yes.
It would be nice, separate of the budget, but of hearing from him and like meeting him and hearing, you know,
Sure.
how many constituent calls are they getting, like things like that. Because it's, as Councilor Carney said, it was a big discussion at town meeting last year, and I feel like we haven't gotten any of those numbers. I just want to know.
Yep.
I trust you, but I would actually like to meet Ethan too.
Sure.
Any further discussion on this budget? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the Conservation Department budget for fiscal 2026 in the amount of $87,468.
Second by Councilor Carney. Any further discussion? Councilor Butler?
No further discussion. I was voting.
Oh, you're voting already? I tried to do the discussion. I don't want to cut you off and then the vote. Okay, all those in favor? Get those hands up. Okay, thank you. 6-0, Sherry. Aye, budget number 14 is the planning board budget.
Planning board budget, we are requesting level funding. Main expenses within this budget, the cost for the clerk to record the meetings. We average 2 meetings a month at $200 each. The advertising line item, $3,000, which is used to advertise their meetings and any bylaw changes. We do collect some revenue within this department. Current year to date, just over $7,300. The total budget request for fiscal '26 is $10,775.
Question, Mr. Councilor Carney.
Why not is the town planner in this budget?
Town planner is in the town council's budget.
In our budget?
In our budget, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is just for the planning board, which she supports, which is,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councilor Chines?
Sorry, this is going to be another kind of pain question, but similar to the discussion on the clerk's department, in contractual services other than advertising, we've spent a grand total of $31 over the last 3 years. Could we zero out those other line items that, other than apparently a package that was sent out in fiscal 2023 really hasn't been used?
Well, what has happened, there has been a new hire, Samantha.
Yep.
It was new, and so we decided we wanted to leave that in there in case, for her to have some funds to use as needed.
Okay,
So-
I would just maybe ask Mr. Mayo, as we look at then the fiscal, I can't believe I'm saying this, 2027 budget, that once she has some more time under her belt, we take a look at some of those, just to make sure, again, we're not holding dollars in places where we don't need to.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the planning board budget? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the planning board budget for fiscal year 2026 in the amount of $10,775.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Carney. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? That is also 6-0, Sherry. J, Budget 15, Zoning Board of Appeals.
Board of Appeals budget, we are recommending that this budget be increased $700 over the current fiscal year. We average out this budget, the main cost of this budget is the cost for holding the hearings. The cost to hold a single hearing is approximately $614. We average 50 hearings a year. That totals $30,700. We have $300 for office supplies. Brings us to the $31,000 requested.
Any questions from the council on that budget? Seeing none, would entertain a motion.
Move to approve the Board of Appeals budget for fiscal 2026 in the amount of $31,000.
Do I have a second? Second from Councilor Carney. No discussion. All those in favor? 6-0, Sherry. K, the final budget for tonight. Council on Aging.
Final budget is Council on Aging. We're recommending that this budget be increased $8,228 over the current fiscal year. This increase is all in personal services and is for contractual and negotiated increases. On the expense side, there was some moving of money. We reduced oil and additives by $2,300, increased motor vehicle parts $1,450, and the tire line item to $850. Total budget request for fiscal '26 is $298,626.
Any questions on this budget from the councilors? Seeing none, would entertain a motion on this.
Yes, move to approve the Council on Aging budget for fiscal year 2026 in the amount of $298,626.
Do I have a second? Second by Councilor Carney. No discussion before, no discussion now. Seeing all, discussion is complete. All those in favor? Sherry and others, 6-0 vote on Budget K. We are now done with budgets. And at the risk of putting you on the spot, would you like to introduce yourself to us, those in the town that are watching, and maybe
Sure.
give us a little background or whatever you want to do?
Absolutely.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise. So my name is Elizabeth Rourke. I have 23 years in local government experience. I started my career with the city of Somerville, and I was there for 10 years. And then I moved on to North Reading to be the finance director there, and I was there for 11 years. And most recently, I was the assistant CFO with the town of Concord. And now here I am in Wakefield.
Oh, welcome. Any questions, other than welcoming you, any questions from the counselors, or did you have something, town administrator?
I wanted to add a little anecdote here. So I first met Liz, what was the year? What was the
It
year?
was 10 years ago.
10 years ago, when I was asked to serve on the screening committee for the North Andover new town manager, North Reading town manager. So I didn't know anybody over there. I think I knew a member of the select board that wanted me to sit on the screening committee, and it was great. It was Saturday mornings or Saturday days. And Liz was on the committee as a town representative. And someone came in to apply for the job, and we had interviews. And this person came in with inaccurate assessment of North Reading's financials and saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. And so Liz turned bright red and was very composed during the meeting, but as soon as that person left, boom, did we hear about it. I said, I like that person. So I kind of got to know her and followed her career a little bit. And she's going to be a great asset to the town. Also is very well versed in our personnel software and payroll program, Munis, which is going to be a great help to us. So,
yes.
Also comes very highly recommended. Worked in Somerville with Ed Bean, who is a very well-respected member of our finance committee. So we feel really good about this.
Great.
hire.
I'm very happy to be here.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Councilor Chine?
Can I just add, so, having met with Steve for a number of years in FinCom and Town Council, I know that he has a list of really talented people from other communities that he would love to poach. And you have been, I can vouch for the fact that you've been on that list. So it's really wonderful to have you here. We're glad you joined us, and thank you for coming to Wakefield.
Thank you.
Right. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Sorry
much.
for the extended stay.
And also Karen Burke, who does a great job at the senior center. Don't walk out, Karen. What were you doing today, like before you came here? Did you maybe jump in a van to help out the other day or today? One of the vans? You drove a van?
You driving?
Oh, I drive sometimes.
Yeah. So not only does she run it, but sometimes she jumps in when we need something done for the seniors.
Down on the roads, I'm driving.
So,
Thank you all.
Thank you. Great person.
So, Town Administrator, we would go back to item 6?
I think so. Thank you for the courtesy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
No problem. 6A, take these separately, I assume. 6A, we have Lakeshore Drive, the request for a no-through way sign with vote anticipated. This one has been, do we have anything on this other than that, we know it's gone through all the approval processes?
Yes.
Yes, questions?
TAC recommends it.
Okay, TAC recommends. Councilor Vincent first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McLean. Yeah, I've talked to numerous residents on that street over the last few days and actually went and visited the street as well. If you know where Lakeshore Drive is, it's about 2/3 of the way up Main Street, and they have a habitual problem. As you can see, it goes back to February 2024. They have a problem where people think there's too much traffic on Main Street, let me turn on Lakeshore, and then they realize it's a cul-de-sac and they have to turn around, and it's happening with a lot of frequency. There's only about 10 houses there, and I probably spoke with 5 of the residents and said this was a problem and asked if we would approve the sign. Thank you.
And Councilor Butler?
I can imagine, and I saw that I talked to Detective Anderson and
Lieutenant.
Okay.
No, thank you for the promotion, I'm sure.
The promotion. And he said numerous people had commented on it. I mean, I think people are not switching off because of congestion on North Ave. Just as somebody who lives there, like people turn around in my driveway all the time. They're turning around to park. We can put up the sign. It's not going to change people using it to bang the U-turn to like park on that street. But I think my threshold is always numerous residents complaining, so I'm in favor of this as well.
All right. Any other questions or comments by councilors? Entertain a motion?
Move to approve the no throughway sign request for Lakeshore Drive.
Do I have a second? Second by Councilor Carney. All those in favor? 6-0. Sherry, moving to item B, Walton Street, no outlet sign. Vote anticipated. We had seen this one before, I believe, Councilor Vincent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McLean. This is another one. I asked Lieutenant Anderson if he would put this back on for reconsideration after we voted in September, and I candidly was one of the people that voted not to put the sign up. I have gone to Walton Street numerous times. I've talked to numerous residents over there, probably about 6. When it initially became forced, it was only Mr. Finley who would file the request, so it had come from just one resident. I wanted to revisit that, so I went over and talked with residents, and I'm satisfied there's enough people on there that it warrants having the requested sign. Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Butler.
As the follow-up, I also talked to Lieutenant Anderson, and I'm glad that Councilor Vincent went and scoured the townsfolk to find that they were opposed to this. None of the other people, no one else has brought this up. Not a soul. Nobody's brought it to anybody's attention. Now, perhaps Councilor Vincent, in reaching out to them, they're like, yeah, we'd like a sign. But nobody else has asked. So this is, again, doing a sign for one guy. I'm gonna be a no.
Councilor Carney.
Yeah, I made the mistake after the last meeting when we turned these down, that within days, I got an email from someone who lived on, Walton Place, which is further up towards the Main Street side of Lowell Street. And I don't know why we just don't allow it, because I have a street, mine says dead end, but the preference on what the terminology is. But, any one of these streets can be treated that way. And when Lowell Street gets backed up, and I use that as an example, and that's what was brought up in this case, it does not often gets backed up going south. But when it does, they're coming all the way from Route 1. And for years, UPS has had this rule that their vans can't take a right-hand turn. They got to come into Wakefield, so we're stuck with that traffic. The one place we're protected is when you come off by the hotel into Pleasure Island Road area, you got 3 lights, and the light in front of the hotel lets less than 4 cars through. So you don't usually see a backup through that. So I looked at it one day, what's happening here? And I drove down there, and the traffic was all the way down to Route 1 coming through South Litchfield. Going the opposite direction, we have the same thing, but greater. Lowell Street is backed up at least one day a week. Something happens in anywhere, and the traffic gets diverted. And I'm hoping that the software that Lieutenant Anderson is going to get is going to prove that. From the standpoint that, we have to be looking at that when we make a decision in one area. It affects other streets. So when you do traffic calming on North Ave, it's definitely going to affect Main Street, and it's definitely going to affect Lowell Street, because people are going to take the most convenient route. Waze and Google Map are going to bring you that way. So when things get backed up, anyone who's a real commuter, and I mean real commuter, daily taking to and from either in my case it was Worcester, now it's from Somerville, you use Waze on a daily basis to see, okay, if something's backed up, what's happening? And then all of a sudden I look at the map and I can tell in Waze that it's not 128, it's not 93, it's 128, so I'll take even go through Melrose Highlands. So people are looking at that. Businesses are looking at that. Truckers definitely are looking at that. I mean, they're gonna be following the easiest route that's gonna save them money on their money. So I appreciate the fact that people want that to happen. I'm not sure whether it's one citizen or not, people will try to take those, people who don't use, I mean, these aren't commuters, people who don't use Waze or Google Maps are going to try to take a right-hand turn to save things. And you may be right as far as the people on Lakeside, some of them turning around for parking. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But when the traffic backs up, people will do weird things.
Well, Main Street's never backed up. So like that, it's backed up on July 4th, other than that. But, no, I get the idea. My concern over this is just sort of process. Number of people, we said, on Lakeshore Drive, which has only like 8-10 houses. There's like 30-40 houses that are affected by this sign. And only one person's called in to complain about it. So that's it. If it was a real problem, I would have thought we'd either hear from people, or when it got voted down, if people were upset about it, I would think you'd have heard from them. We didn't hear from anybody, so I don't think it's a real problem. So let's not pay for a sign.
Any other discussion? Entertain a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve sorry, what did we call this?
Walton Street, no outlet sign?
The Walton Street no outlet sign, thank you, as presented by the Traffic Advisory Committee.
Second.
And second by Councilor Carney. I think we've discussed this one. All those in favor? Opposed? Sherry, that's 5-1 with Councilor Butler opposed.
Oh, we agreed once.
It's Walton Lane, right? Not street?
This one is Walton Street.
It's Walton Street.
Okay, on the agenda it says lane.
No, that's the improvements thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
There are many Waltons.
It's
Many
lane, I
Waltons.
appreciate that, thank you.
I'm
Are
glad we
at a-
didn't also have Walton Street on the
Yeah.
agenda today.
Walden, right. Walden Road
Or Walton School.
School.
And they're
I-
both off the wall, too.
Yeah. Unlike Griffin, which has different spellings at each end of the street. Anyway, licenses, item A.
Mr. Chairman, if you would like, you can take all these in one vote.
I'd very much like.
We can do them separately. These are stragglers. It's a lot less than there have been in the past, but
Right, but they're all stragglers
They're all
who
stragglers,
have
yeah.
met the conditions
Yeah.
that they must meet for us to take that
exactly.
vote.
So, Mr. Chair, I move to approve the remaining 2025 license renewals as presented in the packet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Carney. Any discussion on straggler licenses? Seeing none, all those in favor? 6-0, Sherry. Item 9,
There may be other
donations.
stragglers later on too, so just don't, this might not
That's
be
true.
the
Yeah, it
end.
might not be the only straggler.
That might be the only ones.
Right, well, we're here for business. We're open every couple weeks. Item 9, donations, A, library.
Mr. Chair, move to approve donations in the amount of $21,450 to the BB Library with thanks.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Carney. Any discussion about library donations? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Sherry, that's 6-0. B, Council on Aging.
Mr. Chair, move to accept donations in the amount of $500 to the Council on Aging from various donors with thanks.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilor Carney. Any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0, Sherry. Item 10, warrants, the most interesting part of the evening.
Thank you, Chair McLean. First warrant is 18. The amount is $10,843,467.09. Most of that, 7.146 million of that was for the new Wakefield Memorial High School. Also, the treasurer was 1.5 million of that. Warrant number 20 in the amount of $7,409,301.02. Most of that was the light department, group insurance, and public works. Warrant number 22 at $8,185,010.32. $5 million of that was under town council for Wakefield Memorial High School. And the last one, warrant 24, $6.758117.12 million. Most of that was the light department and group insurance adjustments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Item 11, approval of minutes.
Yes,
Motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the Town Council minutes for December 16th, 2024, with the correction of the amount for the memorandum of understanding for the Economic Development Council. That should be $1 million. It's listed as $100 million, which it would be nice to have that kind of money to spend.
I missed that one. I did have a correction, but I missed that one. Wow. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Carney. All those in favor? That's 6-0, Sherry, with the correction. We wish we had that 100 million. That is item 11. Item 12, announcements. Well, the only ones that I'll have before we get to the others are, I was at the menorah lighting with town administrator, and it was, as usual, a wonderful and well-attended event. And on Saturday, we had another Friends of the BV Library book collection, which was in the snow, spirited, people coming from communities outside of Wakefield. People from Reading coming in to drop off books. I know I'm a dinosaur. I don't Kindle. I don't listen to books. I read the books. And they got another good store. There were probably 15 volunteers there total. Lugging books, that's my specialty. Well suited to my abilities. And they've got a lot of people that know books better than I do and sort them into categories. And then those will be sold, and they will make, as they have over the years, tens of thousands of dollars that wind up going to the library to fund various projects. Those are my only two announcements. Anybody else have any? I know we have one, but I start with the counselors, not seeing anything. Councilor Chine?
Just very quickly, I just wanted to mention the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield is having their annual trivia night coming up on February 1st at the Elks. I believe the doors open at 5 and it starts at 6, but that's a great event. I encourage people to go to that and support the Scholarship Foundation.
Thank you very much. Any other counselors? Not seeing counselors. Are there any other announcements, Town Administrator?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the council is aware, and after discussions with my wife and family, I will retire as Wakefield's Town Administrator as of July 3rd, 2025. My family is growing, and with our fourth grandchild, and it's another boy, coming this spring, I want to spend my time focusing on them, my parents who are still with us, and spend more time with my wife, Jean, whose birthday is today, so I'm missing it yet again because it kind of always falls on a meeting night. I just want the public to know that this position has been and will forever be the professional honor of my life. It is such a labor of love, and I have been so blessed to work with a tremendous team of town employees who deeply care about Wakefield, and I would stack them up against any community in the world. I have also enjoyed wonderful support from the citizens in town, especially those who volunteer their time to make Wakefield a better place for all. Now, much will be said, I am sure, but for now, I would just like to offer my deepest appreciation to this and past town councils, or boards of selectmen in the past, finance committees, school committees, town employees, especially my department heads, a few of which were here tonight, and of course Sherry for all their support over the years. It has been such an honor to serve with you all, and over the next 6 months or so, we have a lot to do, and I'll be with you all every step of the way. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Town Administrator. Any other announcements or comments?
Could I would just like to comment?
Sure.
I think there's going to be a lot of time to say a lot of things on about Steve, but I just want to thank you, Steve, and your family. Happy birthday to Jean, for everything that you've done, for this community as a town administrator, as a selectman before then, volunteering in many capacities. I think those of us who are on the town council and who've served have seen the fact that you put your heart and soul to this job every single day. You're accessible. I mean, really more than you should be in terms of when we reach out with questions. You're responsive to the citizens of the community. You do an amazing job keeping a lot of balls up in the air, and both kind of professionally as a member of the town council and personally as a resident, having the chance to work with you has been just an absolute blessing and joy. for the last 6 years that I've been on the council. So again, we'll have more to say, but I just wanted to say, thank you on my behalf for everything that you've done. And wow, this is going to be a big change for us.
Anything else? Councilor Carney?
Yeah, I want to quote a fellow select person with Steve, Jimmy Good, saying when we chose Steve, it was the best thing we ever did, Steve. And
Thank you, John.
I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of your family. I'm proud to know you, and you're going to be missed. You're going to be missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Seeing nothing else at this point, item 13, matters not anticipated for the agenda. Does anyone have anything tonight? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:51 p.m.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor? 6-0, Sherry. This meeting is concluded at 9:51 p.m. Thank you all.